Chapter 3597. This item seizes the fortune of the heavens, condenses the essence of heaven and earth, and gathers the blood of true dragons. It's called Green Abyss Dragon Saliva. Kong Hongwu said word by word, his tone full of admiration and regret. Perhaps there is a medicine of immortality in this world, perhaps it exists in the hands of the Immortal Palace's Empress, but the medicine of immortality is hard to come by, and the fate of immortality cannot be expected. This Green Abyss Dragon Saliva can increase one's lifespan by 2,000 years. What's the difference between it and immortal medicine of immortality? Alas, it's a pity that I'm not a Taoist, so I can't participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering. This item is reserved for a Taoist. While speaking, Kong Hongwu carefully waved his hand and the jade box was about to soar into the sky. At this moment, a voice familiar to Xiao Hua sounded from afar. Hall Master Kong, wait. Hua de Zhenren? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and looked at the figure that flew out. Oh. So it's Taoist Hua de. Kong Hongwu's expression didn't change. He nodded slightly and said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" "I have something to ask Hall Master." Hua de Zhenren's gaze was very clear. He smiled and said, "Please speak. My Star Lord Hall doesn't have anything that can't be said to others. Taoist can ask." Kong Hongwu seemed to understand something and said with a smile, "I was invited by Hall Master to come and watch the ceremony. Star Lord Hall's ceremony is spectacular and extremely respectful to our Taoist cultivators. I can represent the Taoist cultivators of the hidden immortal continent to thank Star Lord Hall for their hard work." Hua de Zhenren said and bowed on behalf of the cultivators. Kong Hongwu faintly smiled and raised his hand. "This is my duty." "It's nothing." Xiao Hua sneered. He knew that Kong Hongwu had arranged this long ago. Hua de Zhenren bowed to Kong Hongwu on behalf of the Taoist sections. Kong Hongwu actually just raised his hand and bowed back. The prestige of Confucian cultivators could be seen. Then Hua de Zhenren said, "But I feel that Hall Master Kong sealed the 3 treasures in the jade box and didn't let us see it. I feel that it's inappropriate. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Who can guarantee that there's nothing in the jade box? The palace master is magnanimous, but he can't stop others from having other thoughts." What spiritual master said is very reasonable. This old man's thinking is lacking. Kong Hongwu nodded slightly, but when his gaze fell on the jade box he said awkwardly, "It's just that this azure dragon saliva was sealed in this jade box by my Confucian sage with inscriptions. Only the magic of Taoist cultivators can open it. Once this jade box is opened, the item inside will be taken by the cultivator who opens it. This old man can't let Taoist and fellow immortals take a look." "Well." Hua de Zhenren looked troubled. He waved his hand and said, "If that's the case, I'll trust you. After all, Star Lord Hall." However, at this moment, Taoist Xianxia's voice rang out again. "Old man Hua de, you may believe in the Star Lord Hall, but we may not. How can you represent the Taoism of the world? What you said earlier was right. Seeing is believing. How can we be sure if we don't see for ourselves?" That's right. In an instant, voices of doubt rose and fell everywhere. Hua de Zhenren was furious. He pointed at Taoist Xianxia in the distance and said, "Old man Xianxia, you may not believe in my thousands of years of reputation, but how can you not believe in Star Lord Hall's 100,000 or even 1,000,000 years of reputation? When has there ever been a mistake in the Jade meeting, which is held every 10 years? It hasn't happened before, but it doesn't mean it won't happen this time. It doesn't mean it won't happen in the future." Taoist Xianxia sneered. "And how can I know if there have been any mistakes in the past? I'm afraid only Star Lord Hall knows. Or second brother Hua de, you know that, right?" You're being unreasonable." Hua de Zhenren was so angry that his face turned red. He looked up at Kong Hongwu and the 28 immortal generals and said, "This old man has never heard of a situation where the rare treasure invited by the Jade meeting was not honored." "Haha, you two don't have to argue," Kong Hongwu said confidently with a smile. "Hua de Zhenren is this old man's good friend. This old man doesn't know this fellow Taoist. However, both of you are fighting for the Taoism cultivators and are the backbone of the Taoism cultivators. This old man is very comforted. Although this old man can't open this jade box without permission, this old man can swear a Confucian oath to prove that this jade box, and the previous 2 jade boxes, has the thing this old man is talking about." Hua Dezhenren was stunned. Obviously, Kong Hongwu's words were beyond his imagination. Qingsu Daoist was helpless. He thought for a bit and lowered his head. After all, a Confucian oath was similar to a Taoist oath. Once the oath was made, it would take effect immediately. I, Kong Hongwu, as the Lord of Star-Lord Hall, as a Confucian Grandmaster, swear to the Star Saint of our Confucian ancestors. As Kong Hongwu recited the oath, thunder rumbled in the void. It was as if dozens of dragons fell on top of Kong Hongwu's head. At the same time, a crimson rainbow bridge fell from the sky and covered Kong Hongwu. Today, I hold 3 jade boxes in my hand. The 3 items on Jadestige Mountain match what I said. If there is even the slightest difference, I will be smashed to pieces and my soul will be destroyed. My cultivation will not be able to advance, and I will never be able to step into the realm of literary saint for the rest of my life. Kacha! With a loud sound, dozens of thunderbolts fell on top of Kong Hongwu's head. The top of the crimson rainbow bridge condensed an extremely tiny crystal. This crystal was crimson in color and carried traces of bloody light. Once this crystal was formed, the crimson rainbow bridge immediately rolled back and disappeared into the horizon with this crystal. This is the oath of a Confucian cultivator? Xiao Hua was dumbstruck as he watched from the side. Damn it, isn't this kind of momentum too great? Compared to this, our Taoist oath is almost like whispers. Fellow Immortal Huade, fellow Immortal. What do you think? Kong Hongwu's tone was still indifferent. He asked softly, but there was an indescribable majesty in his voice. Hua Dezhenren seemed to have woken up. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said, Hallmaster Kong is righteous and magnanimous. I admire you. Qingsu Daoist's face was also a bit pale. His eyes seemed to have a kind of greed. He stared at the jade boxes and didn't say anything else. In that case, please. Kong Hongwu raised his hand. The jade boxes once again soared into the sky and fell into the dragon gate, disappearing. Everyone, except Xiao Hua, looked at the flying dragon with a burning gaze. They were reluctant to part with it. Cough cough, fellow immortals. Kong Hongwu cleared his throat and said, This old man has already sent the 3 treasures to the Yaotai Mountain. As for where they landed, this old man doesn't know. Either way, treasures have spirits. Those who are fated will get them. These 3 fated people must be among you fellow immortals. Of course, apart from these 3 treasures, the entire Yaotai Mountain will be open to all fellow immortals who are participating in the Yaotai gathering. Fellow immortals can get their own spiritual grasses and spiritual items. My Star-Lord Hall won't interfere. The entire Yaotai Mountain? Xiao Hua was shocked. He heard from Li Xiang that every Yaotai gathering was a part of the Yaotai Mountain. He didn't seem to have heard that it was completely used. What's going on? Not to mention Xiao Hua, almost everyone was shocked. After all, this place was big, so the chances of finding treasures were reduced. Many thanks for Hallmaster Kong's help. Taoist Huada smiled and said, This way, we Taoist cultivators can pick more spiritual fruits and find more spiritual items. No need to be so polite. Kong Hongwu waved his hand. This is only a kind of compensation. Because this Yaotai gathering has a very small number of imperial tutors' lots, this old man felt apologetic in his heart, so he specially sealed and opened a lot of spiritual lands for fellow immortals to pick. Oh, how many are there? Taoist Huade asked in surprise. Obviously, this was also out of his expectations. Kong Hongwu waved his big sleeve. Shwa! Like a peacock spreading its tail, 10 rays of colorful light rushed out. 10 fist-sized objects that were somewhat similar to the Imperial Tutor seal fell in the air. This object looked like a leopard or a tiger. Its body was covered with layers of dragon scales. Layers of yellow mist emerged from the dragon scales, wrapping the entire Imperial Tutor seal. Baiyan! Xiao Hua saw clearly through the light. It was actually an Imperial Tutor seal. Ah! Hallmaster Kong, are you kidding me? There are only 10 Imperial Tutors lots? Taoist Huada almost blurted out. How is this enough? Sorry. Fellow Immortal Huada. Kong Hongwu's face was full of apology. This old man knows that there are too few Imperial Tutors lots, so I opened the whole Yaotai Mountain. Moreover, this time the 3 rare treasures are really shocking. It's also a kind of compensation for fellow immortals of Taoist.
Alas, fine.
Taoist Huade shook his head slightly and didn't speak again. His eyes were looking at the Dragon Gate, but no one knew what he was thinking. Hall Master Kong, this year's Imperial Tutors lots are too few. Taoist Xianxia said loudly. Why don't you add more? Otherwise, this old man and others won't participate. Kong Hongwu shook his head slightly. If you can add more, why do you need to ask? This is also the reason why I invited Taoist Huade to come here. If you don't want to participate, this old man won't force you. While speaking, Kong Hongwu waved his hand.
Roar.
Unexpectedly, 10 dragon roars came out from the by an Imperial Tutor's seal. The by and outside the Imperial Tutor seal seemed to come alive. It roared and rushed into the Dragon Gate with yellow clouds and disappeared. Thank you, heavens, for your kindness. The ceremony is complete. Kong Hongwu murmured, and the sound of bamboo and string instruments rose again. The 28 immortal drums sounded like thunder again, and all the clouds began to roll violently again. They gradually shrank into the sky and connected with each other. Behind the 28 clouds, the immortal generals and immortal soldiers were also hidden in the clouds. Even the Dragon Gate, which was shrouded in 9 colors, had disappeared. Only the Dragon Gate, which was overflowing with light, stood majestically in the air, waiting for the dragonized carps to come back, or for the daring cultivators to charge in. Chapter 3598. Fellow Immortals, the Dragon Gate to enter the Yaotai meeting is here. You can only enter but not leave. After 6 hours, the whole Yaotai mountain will still be sealed. The Dragon Gate can only be opened if you find 3 rare treasures and 10 Imperial Preceptors lots. Of course, if you don't have such good luck and can't find all of them, the Dragon Gate will still be opened after a year. Kong Hongwu's figure didn't change. He said loudly, fellow immortals who want to get the rare treasures and the Imperial Preceptors lots can enter the Dragon Gate now. Humph. Only 10 Imperial Preceptors lots. I don't want to die. Immortal Xianxia looked at the Dragon Gate. Although his eyes were full of desire and eagerness, he finally gritted his teeth and shouted. He turned around and flew out of the Yaotai mountain. Yes, although we are envious, we don't have such good luck. It's better to go back as soon as possible. Immediately after, another dozen or so golden core cultivators flew out from various places, mumbling as they followed spiritual master Xianxia and flew away. Kong Hongwu's expression didn't change. He just glanced at immortal Xianxia and the others and withdrew his gaze. Although such troublemakers didn't appear every time, he had seen many of them. In front of so many Taoist practitioners, he wouldn't show any difference. The Imperial Preceptors lots are useless to me. I won't compete with the younger generation. At this time, Immortal Huade, who had been silent, said, but I'm very interested in the Green Abyss Dragon Saliva. I want to enter the Dragon Gate to try my luck. I wonder if Hall Master Kong will agree? Kong Hongwu was stunned, but he didn't show any reaction on his face. He just replied indifferently, fellow Immortal Huade, although I invited you to attend the meeting, any Taoist practitioner can participate in the Yaotai meeting. There's no limit to the number of times. Since you think the Green Abyss Dragon Saliva is useful to you, you can enter. You don't have to ask for my permission. Immortal Huade was now at the late nascent soul stage. Although he hadn't reached the peak, his cultivation had already reached the bottleneck. He couldn't break through it either by himself or by using some secret skills of Confucian practitioners. Seeing that his life was not far away, these 2,000 years was an irresistible temptation for him. In fact, if Immortal Xianxia didn't know that he might face Kong Hongwu's attack as soon as he entered the Dragon Gate, he would certainly rush into the Dragon Gate to participate in the Yaotai meeting without hesitation. Immortal Huada slightly clenched his teeth. Then he turned into a rainbow and disappeared into the Dragon Gate in an instant. Immortal Huada was Immortal Huada? Immortal Huada to Xianxia's Immortal Huada. As soon as Taoist Huada made his move, the other late nascent soul stage cultivators who coveted the Azure Nether Dragon Saliva were also unable to hold themselves back. Calm, Immortal Qing. Immortal Qing and Immortal Cultivators. Immortal Mountain. Kong Hongwu looked at them with an imperceptible smile on his face. His body slowly produced clouds and disappeared into the depths of the clouds in a moment. Master. Chong Yu and Wu Tian, who were standing beside Xiao Hua, swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said in a low voice, "Damn it, a lifespan of 2,000 years, if it weren't for Master, we would have entered the Jade Pavilion gathering to try our luck. If you want to go, go. This is a kind of blessing. Maybe you can get it." Xiao Hua smiled faintly. Chong Yu's heart moved. He couldn't help but look at the Dragon Gate. He was a cultivator at the late Gold Core stage. Among thousands of cultivators, he was considered to be in the upper class. "Senior Xiao." At this time, a respectful voice sounded. Xiao Hua turned his head and saw Zhu Qingli, who had left without saying goodbye earlier. Zhu Qingli respectfully bowed and said, "Junior met an old friend the day before yesterday and exchanged cultivation experiences with him. Junior has just come out of seclusion. Is Senior going to attend the Yaotai meeting today? If possible, Senior, please take care of me." Xiao Hua smiled. He just glanced at Zhu Qingli and didn't say anything. His heart was benevolent, but he wasn't an idiot. How could he take Zhu Qingli's words seriously? Moreover, there was also Chong Yu and Wu Tian's description. As a nascent soul cultivator, he naturally wouldn't attack Zhu Qingli. But how could he take care of Zhu Qingli? Zhu Qingli seemed to have anticipated the current awkwardness, so he remained calm. He smiled at Xiao Hua and said to Wu Tian, "Fellow Taoist Wu, since you're already here, why don't you come with me and Senior Chong to the Jade Pavilion conference?" Wu Tian's face was calm. He said faintly, "I'm already serving Master Xiao. With his guidance, I don't need any treasures." Zhu Qingli was stunned. He obviously didn't expect Xiao Hua to accept Wu Tian as his disciple. In addition to being surprised, his eyes couldn't help but have a kind of strong jealousy. Wu Tian's words were like a heavy hammer, waking Chong Yu up. Chong Yu also smiled and said, "That's right. I'm also serving Master Xiao now. I don't need the state teacher's fortune anymore. As for the 2,000 years of life, I'm confident I can get it with Master Zhao's guidance. I also don't need to participate in this so-called Yaotai meeting." Zhu Qingli hid the regret in his heart. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands. "Congratulations, fellow Taoists. I don't have much fortune, so I have to think of a way myself. I hope I'll be lucky enough to see the moment you two become masters." After saying that, he bowed to Xiao Hua again. "Junior also wishes Senior to get what you want." Then, without waiting for Xiao Hua to say anything, he flew into the Dragon Gate and disappeared. "Master." Chong Yu transmitted his voice. Disciple remembers that Zhu Qingli also went to Master's quiet room alone that day. Did Master not agree to his request? Xiao Hua smiled and transmitted his voice. "Other people's opportunities are other people's. You don't need to ask. Even if other people are heartless, they're other people's. You don't need to know." Disciple understands. Chong Yu knew Xiao Hua was a gentleman. Although he wasn't satisfied with Zhu Qingli's actions, he wouldn't talk about Zhu Qingli's misdeeds in front of others. "You can make your own arrangements." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "When I come back from Yaotai Mountain, I'll look for you. As for this green abyss dragon saliva, you really don't need it." "Yes, disciple understands." Chong Yu and Wu Tian bowed and said, "Congratulations. Taoist Xiao to successfully obtain the lot for the state teacher." After saying that, the two turned around and flew away. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry to enter Yaotai Mountain. Instead, he pinched his chin and looked around carefully. Now, in the sky above Yaotai Mountain, other than that dragon gate, everything else was covered by red clouds. It was exactly the same as before. He couldn't see the true situation of Yaotai Mountain. At this moment, figures rushed in one after another at the Dragon Gate and disappeared one by one. Originally, there were several thousand cultivators, but now more than 30% had entered. Apart from Xiao Hua and the other cultivators who were still watching, about 20% of the cultivators were very decisive. They flew away one after another, not daring to delay here. 10 lots for the state teacher. Xiao Hua thought to himself. Pitifully few. However, if this Xiao acts, it won't be a problem to get one of them. In reality, even if I can't get the lot for the state teacher, it won't be a problem. If Xiao Jian and Chongling want to revive Jiang country, they won't succeed in 10 or 20 years. This Xiao just needs to get it before they establish their country. Also, even if this Xiao doesn't have the lot for the state teacher, can't Jiang country sell dog meat and let old man Bagua of the Copper Pillar country take the position of state teacher? As to the green abyss dragon saliva, there are too many people fighting for it. This Xiao covets the 2,000-year lifespan, but if I really want to take it, I will have to be ruthless. This Xiao just entered Yuanying, and has 2,000 years of lifespan. This Xiao has the 5-element righteous thunder to cultivate Yuanying. I fear that I won't need 1,000 years to enter late Yuanying. There should be enough time. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking, another familiar voice sounded from the distance. Fellow Taoist Xiao, can we travel together? Xiao Hua looked up. It was Hong Songzi flying over with a smile. Haha, of course. Xiao Hua smiled, and moved his body to fly over. He raised his hands and answered. Unexpectedly, Hai Hongzi behind Hong Songzi frowned slightly and said with displeasure, Fellow Taoist Hong Songzi, we have been discussing how the three of us can work together these days. Also, the talisman I forged can only be used by the three of us. Adding on Taoist Xiao, how can we use it? Also, Taoist Xiao's strength is outstanding. If he joins us, we fear that the distribution we made before is not appropriate. Taoist Yuan Qing, who was flying beside Hai Hongzi, also glanced at Hai Hongzi with displeasure. He didn't expect that Hai Hongzi didn't send a sound transmission but directly said these words in front of Xiao Hua. Even if Xiao Hua had self-restraint, he probably wouldn't be able to cooperate with them. Sure enough, Xiao Hua smiled faintly, stopped in midair and said, Fellow Taoist Hong Songzi, since you have already discussed, this Xiao will not rashly join. This. Hong Songzi was very embarrassed and angry. He turned his head to look at Hai Hongzi. Unfortunately, Hai Hongzi only smiled apologetically at Xiao Hua and ignored Hong Songzi. This Xiao will go first. Xiao Hua raised his hand and gestured slightly. His figure rushed through the sky and landed inside the dragon gate. With a flash of multicolored light, his figure disappeared. Hong Songzi retracted his gaze from the dragon gate and said coldly, Hai Hongzi, what is the meaning of this? Didn't this old man already tell you before? Although I haven't discussed with Taoist Xiao these days, inviting him to join us is not too much, right? Hai Hongzi was not afraid. He only smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Hong Songzi, the Taoist Xiao you mentioned before is a fellow Taoist with similar cultivation to us. Not this Taoist Xiao who is stronger than Taoist Huada. With such a strong fellow Taoist beside us, do you think we can get the Azure Nether Dragon saliva? Even if we get it, how much can we get? Also, fellow Taoist, don't forget that Taoist Huadi is also participating in the Jade Pavilion meeting. His purpose is obviously the Azure Nether Dragon saliva. He and Xiao Hua can be said to be irreconcilable. Do you and I need to get involved? Chapter 3599. It shouldn't be as serious as you think, right? Taoist Yuan Qing shook his head slightly and looked at the place where Xiao Hua disappeared. Maybe it's not that serious, but we have to think so. Hai Hongzi didn't give up his position and explained, if we don't get involved, even if we can't get the Green Abyss Dragon saliva, we can still come back alive from the Jade Pavilion conference. But if we get involved, it'll be a dead end. Hong Songzi looked at Taoist Yuan Qing. Both of their eyes flashed with helplessness. Hai Hongzi was right. Xiao Hua was certainly a great help, but at the same time, he was also a great enemy. The disadvantages of cooperating with Xiao Hua outweighed the advantages. Let's go. Taoist Yuan Qing waved his hand and said, according to our previous discussion, after entering the Jade Mountain, we'll immediately activate the magic treasure refined by Taoist Hai Hongzi. We'll find each other and then join hands to search for the treasure. Hong Songzi and Hai Hongzi nodded and the three of them flew into the Dragon Gate. What they didn't know was that behind the layers of red clouds, Kong Hongwu was also looking at the disappearing Xiao Hua with confusion and thought, this Xiao Hua, how can he be so daring? Even Taoist Qing Su didn't dare to enter, but he dared to come? Could it be that there are secrets among these thousands of cultivators that I don't know? Humph, since you're here, I'll let you know how powerful I am. If I can get the trace of the Grand Mist ancestor from you, it'll be a great contribution. Kong Hongwu's figure also disappeared. At the foot of the Jade Mountain, the number of cultivators gathered became fewer and fewer. The 20% of cultivators who could resist the temptation had already left. The remaining cultivators were just hesitating and waiting. Eventually, more and more cultivators couldn't resist the temptation and rushed into the Dragon Gate. Only a few hundred gold core cultivators and a dozen early nascent soul cultivators remained. However, when another thunderclap came from the red clouds, the huge Dragon Gate began to shake and gradually shrink. The last group of cultivators couldn't resist anymore. They all rushed into the Dragon Gate and waited until the last gold core cultivator disappeared.
Gotcha.
Like glass breaking, the Dragon Gate cracked out of thin air. The Dragon Gate, which had shrunk to a few feet, was broken into dozens of pieces and then melted into golden liquid that fell into the void. When Xianxia flew into the Dragon Gate, a powerful suction force was generated from all around the Dragon Gate. In an instant, a passage formed by 9 colored clouds appeared in front of his eyes. The surface of the passage was a layer of clouds that kept spiraling inward in a spiral shape. In the depths of the clouds, there were still some faint inscriptions flashing. The noble spirit roared and boiled out from the gaps of the clouds. The inscriptions were born in the flickering inscriptions, carrying Xiaohua's figure and constantly rushing into the depths.
Huh.
Xiaohua felt the pressure on his body and the abnormality of the passage in the clouds. He couldn't help but be a little surprised. The pressure on my body seems to be the heavy pressure of the transmission formation. Moreover, the rotation of the passage in the clouds is somewhat similar to the soul cultivator's transmission formation. Could it be that this Dragon Gate is a transmission formation for Confucian cultivators? Or could it be that the Confucian cultivators of the hidden Immortal continent don't have transmission formations, but these transmission formations are not known to ordinary Confucian cultivators? While thinking to himself, Xiaohua tried to release his soul sense. Sure enough, the clouds flashed with an intense tearing force. Xiaohua's soul sense was torn to shreds within a few breaths of time. Xiaohua didn't dare to increase his soul sense for fear that he would destroy this transportation channel. He didn't know where he would end up. This transmission formation seemed to be very far away. Xiaohua stayed in this passage for the time it took to eat a meal. During this time, there was no one in front of the passage. There were also no other cultivators chasing behind the passage. Presumably, every Taoist cultivator who entered the Dragon Gate would have such a legendary passage.
Whoa.
Suddenly, in the passage not far in front of Xiaohua, there was a whimper of wind. A dot of orange light suddenly appeared. Then, the passage in the clouds in front of Xiaohua shrank towards this dot of light as if it was being pulled. Xiaohua's figure also rushed towards this dot of light. Perhaps Xiaohua was shrinking, or perhaps the dot of light was expanding. When Xiaohua flew in front of the dot of light, that dot of light had already turned into a several zhang large light curtain. Xiaohua's whole body flashed with golden light. When he swept with his soul sense, he was immediately bounced back by the light curtain. Although the inscriptions on the light curtain were tumbling, the aura it revealed was so docile that Xiaohua couldn't feel any discomfort. Pa! With a soft and crisp sound, Xiaohua crashed into the light curtain. The scene in front of his eyes overflowed, as if he had passed through several small worlds. When Xiaohua's figure landed, he looked around and unconsciously frowned again. At this time, Xiaohua was standing in a low valley. He was surrounded by several zhang cliffs. High up in the sky, several large clouds condensed into a vortex. The vortex gradually shrank, and one by one, the inscriptions disappeared alternately. There weren't any special spirit fruits or spirit herbs on the nearby cliffs. There were only a number of dark green things that crookedly covered the entire cliff. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a deep pool. There were many small waterfalls around the deep pool. At the foot of the mountain, there were many small streams flowing from the cracks in the cliff and converging into the deep pool. The deep pool was dark green, and a chill mixed with rich world's yuan qi rushed into Xiaohua's mouth and nose. At the edge of the deep pool, there were layers of needle-like leaves covering the ground. If he wasn't mistaken, they should be dark green things that fell down. Xiaohua looked around and was a little surprised. He tried to release his soul sense. After exploring for a while, Xiaohua finally had some understanding of the surroundings. The entire valley was sealed by a layer of restriction. This restriction was broken, and Xiaohua's soul sense couldn't be considered complete. Moreover, where the restriction was intact, Xiaohua's soul sense was suppressed and difficult to penetrate. However, where the restriction was broken, Xiao Hua's soul sense could vaguely penetrate and he could see the spirit herbs growing high up in the cliff. This is a restriction. Xiao Hua already understood and thought to himself, it's no wonder that even though the heaven-earth origin qi here is so dense, there aren't any spirit herbs growing here. Only I, Xiao Hua, will be able to break through this restriction and escape to pick spirit fruits and search for treasures. But, how can I break this restriction? Xiao Hua slowly flew towards the stone cliff, slowly searching. This is the Jasper Pavilion Gathering, a formation personally set up by the Star-Lord Hall. It should be able to trap a late nascent soul stage cultivator. I can't not be cautious. Near the cliff, Xiao Hua's soul sense swept over and he didn't find anything strange. He touched the hard and cold stone wall with his hand, but he still didn't find anything. After Xiao Hua finished looking at the 4 stone cliffs, his gaze once again landed on the jade-green deep pool. This pool couldn't be considered big. It was even smaller than the cold pool in Yellow Flower Ridge. However, the cold air was twice as strong as the cold pool in Yellow Flower Ridge. Ha! This deep pool can absorb divine sense. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over the pool and he was immediately surprised. His eyes flashed with a trace of greed. After thinking for a moment, he plucked a few withered leaves from his space and casually threw them into the pool. The moment these withered leaves landed on the water surface, they only created ripples and the entire leaf instantly sank into the pool. Weak water? Xiao Hua heard of this water that even leaves couldn't bear. He couldn't help but shout, I'm rich. Of course, the incomparably fierce innate primordial water in the eyes of others was absorbed into Xiao Hua's clear water bottle. What could this insignificant weak water count for? Perhaps in Xiao Hua's eyes, it could only be a treasure that could make him open his eyes. However, without waiting for Xiao Hua to land in midair, a chilly wind suddenly appeared and very strangely scraped the ground. A few needle-like leaves were lifted up by the chilly wind. Woo! The needle-like leaves streaked across the air, unexpectedly producing an even more strange whimpering sound. After the whimpering sound passed, a mournful sound rang out. Looking again at the surrounding needle-like leaves of the deep pool, it was as if they were being grabbed by a big hand, flying up into the air in an extremely orderly fashion. The needle-like leaves were gone, exposing the ground beside the pool. At this time, the ground was densely engraved with tiny inscriptions that looked like ants. These inscriptions had begun to squirm like living ants. Wisps of noble aura blew down rapidly with the sound of the wind. When these noble aura passed through the needle-like leaves, many of them were absorbed by the needle-like leaves. In just the blink of an eye, the cold air in the pool surged up even more. The needle-like leaves also swelled up to more than 10 inches. Now, the leaves revealed their original malevolence. They were actually sawtooth-shaped imperial tools. On these imperial tools, there were thin holes that couldn't be seen. In between the holes, there were layers of inscriptions. The mournful whimpering sound came from these holes. The inscriptions were still absorbing the awe-inspiring qi. Countless imperial tools continued to swell up. The entire valley is completely filled with these imperial tools. How much effort is needed to create this? Xiao Hua's gaze swept over, and he was slightly surprised. After all, this imperial array was not only particularly fine, but also covered a large area. He didn't know how much effort it took to create it. Sure enough, as the whirlwind in the valley grew stronger, the inscriptions also began to flicker. The wind borrowed the power of the inscriptions, and the inscriptions aided the might of the wind. The countless imperial tools quickly trembled in the whirlwind. Especially as the whirlwind rose up layer by layer, the inscriptions on the originally ordinary cliff also revealed inscriptions. These inscriptions were different from the inscriptions on the side of the pool. As the whirlwind blew, the inscriptions actually began to chant. Thick awe-inspiring qi quickly descended from the sky and rushed into the whirlwind in the valley. Not only that, but what surprised Xiao Hua the most was that when the cold air in the pool rushed into the whirlwind, countless imperial tools began to condense white frost. A kind of austere killing intent gradually emerged from the whirlwind and quickly diffused throughout the entire valley. The cold wind cut the face, and the frost pierced the heart. Xiao Hua nodded inwardly. The imperial array in the valley had already become like this in just a few breaths. If it was activated, how terrible would it be? Moreover, this imperial array had sealed off the entire valley. If a Dao sect cultivator below the early stage of the Gold Core realm fell into this array, It would be difficult for them to escape. Even if they could forcefully break out of the array, their cultivation would be greatly damaged. Chapter 3600. Of course, this kind of small defensive formation was nothing to Xiaohua right now. Xiaohua didn't need to look at the profundity and power of the defensive formation like he did when he faced the 5 brocade cloud painting, nor did he need to show off his might here. He only smiled and slapped the top of his head. A powerful pressure came out of nowhere, and soon after, a nascent soul hand that could cover the entire valley appeared. Rumble! The nascent soul hand streaked across the sky, colliding with the vast chi pillar and the whirlwind. A huge roar resounded through the entire valley. The soul-wrenching screams were loud at first, but soon after, they stopped abruptly like a chicken or duck being choked by its neck. The countless sharp weapons pierced into the nascent soul's hand in a frenzy, but in the face of the massive hand, they were no more than ants trying to shake a tree. Although the sounds of friction were incessant, they quickly disappeared amid rumbling booms. However, the instant Xiaohua's big hand imprisoned all the inscriptions in the valley. Woo! Another wave of surging sound came from the cold pond. Clusters of golden light appeared in the dark green pond, and the entire pond suddenly gave birth to thousands of whirlpools. These whirlpools were actually able to break through the imprisonment of Xiaohua's nascent soul hand, as if thousands of small snakes were pouncing into Xiaohua's nascent soul hand. Ha! This restriction is actually somewhat interesting. Xiaohua sensed that the entire nascent soul hand was sore and numb. First, the imprisoned cold energy wanted to respond to the weak water, and the edges of the nascent soul hand actually had some dark blue color. This weak water is actually poisonous. What was even more unexpected to Xiaohua was that the poison of this weak water was actually very powerful. Just as the dark blue color appeared on the nascent soul hand, the imprisonment at the edges of the nascent soul hand showed signs of loosening. The imprisonment slightly loosened, and the whirlwind rose up again, and the vast chi pillar also loudly fell down again. Good. It's not simple. Previously, this Xiao felt that the early gold core stage might not be able to resist it. If the defensive formation of this pond and the defensive formation of the cliff complement each other, I'm afraid that even the middle gold core stage won't be able to pass through. Xiaohua was inwardly speechless. He had just entered the Yaotai mountain, and had yet to understand anything, yet he had already encountered such a large formation. Perhaps the Yaotai mountain that was several tens of thousands of li was this powerful? Thinking about the thousands of golden core cultivators, Xiaohua couldn't help but worry for them. Pondering in his heart, Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly waved his hand, and the clear water bottle appeared in his hand. His hand formed a Buddhist seal and hid it. Whoosh! A suction force was generated from the clear water bottle, and it covered the tens of thousands of weak water snakes. Indeed, everything has its nemesis. Under the suction force of the Buddhist artifact, these weak water snakes all surrendered. How could they still care about corroding the hand of a Yuanying? Streams of water flowed into the clear water bottle, and the water in the pool gradually fell. The weak water's corrosion was no longer present, and the entire defensive formation surrounding the mountain valley was unable to withstand Xiaohua's Yuanying's hand. With a light gotcha sound, the Yuanying's hand grasped all of the tiny imperial equipment in its hand. Xiaohua's current spiritual sense and mind could not be considered particularly harmonious, but dealing with these tiny imperial equipment was still a piece of cake. Xiaohua's mind followed the spiritual sense in the Yuanying's hand and swept all of the imperial equipment into the space. The ground of the entire valley was as clean as if it had been licked by a dog. It's a pity that these inscriptions were carved into the ground. Even if this Xiao has the ability to scour 3 feet of the ground, I don't know if they will still be useful after I collect them. Xiaohua prepared to withdraw the Yuanying's hand. Looking at the alternating light and dark inscriptions on the ground, he inwardly pondered. However, he quickly had a good idea. The Yuanying's hand fiercely grabbed the ground. With a loud boom, a large piece of the ground was grabbed by Xiaohua. That ground was originally as hard as iron, but under the Yuanying's hand, it became pure soil. The tiny inscriptions on the ground were immediately crushed by Xiaohua's hand, and they transformed into streams of awe-inspiring qi that rushed into the air, disappearing in a moment. Haha, exactly. Refreshed. Refreshed. Seeing this, Xiaohua was very happy. He was multitasking. On one hand, he urged the Yuanying's hand to destroy the inscriptions in the valley one by one. On the other hand, He urged his psyche power to collect the weak water. After half an hour, the entire valley, whether it was the stone walls or the ground, was in a mess. There was not a single inscription to be seen. Looking at the previously serene cold pool, the pool water was clean, revealing the dark blue bottom of the pool. There were also many inscriptions at the bottom of the pool, as if pieces of articles were engraved there. As for the center of the pool, there were some white bones above the inscriptions that had not been completely corroded by the weak water. Alas, there are 3,000 weak water. Just one scoop is enough to kill a cultivator. It shows that its corrosive power is very strong. 10 years ago, the cultivators who fell into the weak water had already lost their bones. Seeing these white bones, Xiaohua sighed. These white bones must be the Jindan cultivators who participated in this year's Yaotai meeting. How long has it been? And there are already cultivators who died in this weak water pool.
Destroy it.
Xiaohua urged his Yuanying's hand again. In just a moment, the inscriptions at the bottom of the pool were destroyed again. The moment the inscriptions completely disappeared, Xiaohua immediately felt relaxed. Xiaohua was overjoyed and hurriedly released his divine sense. Sure enough, the previous seal on the valley had completely disappeared. His divine sense could spread out for more than 10 miles. The entire Yaotai mountain is still within a huge defensive formation. Pull one hair and the whole body will be affected. Xiaohua understood that this must be the suppression of the Taoist cultivator's divine sense by Star Lord Hall. Withdrawing his Yuanying's hand and looking at the messy valley, Xiaohua urged his figure to fly into the air, ready to leave. However, his figure had just flown a few feet when his heart was moved again. He waved his hand, and Little Silver and Little Gua landed in the air. You two, go and see if there are any good things in this valley. The two little things were very obedient, not rebellious like Little Yellow at all. They each landed in a place. In just a moment, Little Gua came back with his head drooping and somewhat dejected. His little mouth was pursed and his hands were empty.
Ha ha.
Xiaohua smiled, patted his head and put it into his space. Little Silver, on the other hand, poked his head out of the messy mud and stones and chirped at Xiaohua. Xiaohua understood. He lowered his figure and waved his big sleeve. A lot of huge stones and mud were lifted up. A fist-sized bead, emitting a bewitching light, was revealed in the bottom of the deep pool. Weak water bead? Xiaohua was delighted. He grabbed at the air with one hand and that bead fell into his hand. Sure enough, waves of water surged inside the bead. His divine sense was immediately swallowed when he immersed it. It was the weak water bead, a Taoist magic treasure. Looking at the weak water bead in his hand and thinking about the many Taoist cultivators who died in this valley, Xiaohua's heart was filled with mixed feelings. If a cultivator was strong, the Taoist sect would be strong. If a cultivator was weak, the Taoist sect would be weak. Confucian cultivators used Taoist magic treasures to kill Taoist cultivators, and Taoist cultivators came to throw away their lives one by one every 10 years. Now, they were going to fight to the death for only 10 imperial preceptor slots. Their miserable fates were nothing more than this. Alas, my strength is limited and my path is boundless. It seems that what Taoist Master Qing Su said is somewhat reasonable. Xiaohua sighed and flew out of the valley. For the first time, he had the idea of joining hands with someone. At this moment, the Yaotai mountain was no different from an ordinary blessed land. The blazing sun had already risen to 3 poles high up in the sky. The sunlight wasn't scorching hot. Instead, it was very warm. Gusts of cool breeze blew over, carrying with it the fragrance of the forest. Xiaohua stood in the air above a hill and looked into the distance. Mountain ranges were stacked on top of each other, and layers of green trees and green grass were pleasing to the eye. Looking behind him, there was a mountain peak that looked like an ink brush that pierced the sky. There were some palaces and spiritual trees on it. Some immortal birds were flying around the mountain peak. It looked extremely blurry. Wasn't this the Yaotai mountain that he saw earlier? Xiaohua looked for a moment and couldn't see anything strange. This Yaotai mountain was still a mountain range that was tens of thousands of li in size. Thousands of cultivators were casually sent into it. Under the situation where divine sense was suppressed, it would not be easy to encounter a cultivator. Xiaohua thought for a moment and released his divine sense. Contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, his divine sense was also suppressed in this Yaotai mountain. However, His divine sense was slightly better and could be released tens of li away. But even so, it was the lot of 10 state teachers. Only ghosts knew where it would land. It was impossible to find it by relying on ordinary divine sense. He could only rely on luck. Li Xiang's jade eyes had some description of the Yaotai mountain. However, that description was also very clear. It was only what he saw when he entered the Yaotai mountain. Just as he said, there was no reference at all. Because the valley they entered was completely different from the deep forest that Li Xiang entered. After rushing out of the deep forest, the mountain range was also different from what Xiaohua saw now. What Xiaohua could do now was to try his luck and see if he could use his divine sense to find the lot of state teachers one step ahead. Since he was trying his luck, Xiaohua closed his eyes and didn't release his divine sense. He flew towards a place. Xiaohua didn't believe it. This Yaotai mountain had thousands of Taoist cultivators. N plus Star Lord Hall's Confucian cultivators, who would dare to compete with him in luck? Moreover, didn't Xiaohua release his divine sense for tens of li? Xiaohua with his eyes closed clearly flew straighter than Xiaohua with his eyes open. After flying for no less than half a meal's time, Xiaohua opened his eyes and released his divine sense. He saw that he had stopped above a lush green mountain forest. That mountain forest was sandwiched between 2 mountain peaks. At a glance, it was over 100 li in size. The ancient trees in the mountain forest towered. From time to time, the sound of gurgling water could be heard. Occasionally, the howls of ferocious beasts could be heard from the mountain forest. Xiaohua's gaze swept through the mountain forest. After looking for a moment, he raised his head again and looked at the sky. Then, he turned his head again to look at the distant Yaotai mountain. His figure slowly descended. He carefully released his divine sense, preparing to investigate bit by bit. However, Xiaohua's divine sense had only explored 100 zhong when a mournful scream came from the mountain forest to his left. That scream was very muffled. Just as it sounded, it was immediately suppressed. It was as if a cultivator was swallowed by a ferocious beast. Hearing this, Xiaohua raised his eyebrows. At the same time that his divine sense swept over, he used the wind escape technique. His entire figure flew over like a gust of wind. Chapter 36:01. Boom Boom. Waves of awe-inspiring chi fell from the sky, and layers of strange clouds soared into the sky from a corner of the mountain forest. Another Confucian cultivator's defensive formation entered. Xiaohua flew closer, and looked at the picturesque ancient trees within a range of several li. Whether it was the stems, leaves, or trunks, they were all emitting mist, and inscriptions flashing with azure brilliance flowed between the leaves of these ancient trees. He immediately understood that this was a defensive formation composed of thousands upon thousands of ancient trees, and if there was no accident, it should be of the wood attribute. Almost without thinking, Xiaohua clapped his hand, and the Yuanying's hand appeared again. It turned into 100 zhong in size, and grabbed from top to bottom. Kacha! Like a thunderclap, the ancient trees within 100 zhong were all grabbed by the huge hand, and the entire ground shook. Clusters of inscriptions carrying awe-inspiring chi condensed into a 1 zhong long spear that pierced into the huge hand. Unfortunately, before the spear could pierce into the huge hand was already shattered by the restrictive force. Roar! The huge hand overturned the defensive formation, revealing the situation inside. 100 zhong huge beast roared and rushed out from the defensive formation. Under the huge beast, a bloody smell was emitted. The craggy mountain rocks were actually covered with bones. Some of the bones were dried up, and some of the bones were dripping with blood. It was quite glaring. This giant beast was like an ox, with a single horn that was several zhong long standing straight on its forehead. The tip of the horn carried a cold light, and the long fur on the giant beast's body flickered with a green brilliance. A single large hoof stepped on the green clouds, and with an indescribable berserk aura, it pounced towards Xiaohua. How? Xiaohua slightly wrinkled his brows. He knew that this was a kind of ancient beast. Its entire body was coarse and thick, and it was difficult for ordinary magic weapons to break through it. This hoe's mouth and nose could spit out a strange stream of air. This stream of air was the most corrosive magic weapons and magic weapons. Even the protective golden light of a Jindan cultivator would find it difficult to resist. He had only seen this thing in Huang Yi's many ancient memories, and he didn't expect to encounter it in the hidden Immortal continent. Just as Xiaohua had expected, the Hui rushed into the air and violently charged towards Xiaohua. Even when Xiaohua's nascent soul hand descended, the restrictive power was unable to stop the strange airflow from the Hui's horn. "Rise," Xiaohua sneered. The invisible nascent soul inside his body rubbed its hands together. In an instant, the nascent soul's hand suddenly expanded to the size of several mu. Moreover, this several mu-sized hand became much more solid. Puff, puff. The nascent soul's chi waves were shattered one by one, and it forcefully grabbed the chi. The giant palm swayed and was about to grab the Hui from the air. Roar. The Tai Chi was enraged. Its eyes were bloodshot as it let out a long roar. Green waves of air rushed out of its nose and mouth, slamming into the nascent soul's hand. The nascent soul's hand rapidly collapsed. At the same time, a dazzling brilliance appeared on the wild beast Hui's body. This brilliance was like an arrow that directly pierced into the nascent soul's hand. Moreover, within the brilliance was a wisp of green chi. This green chi caused the giant palm to give birth to a slippery feeling. Attacked from both inside and outside, Xiaohua's giant palm was the same as before. It actually had a feeling of being unable to hold on. Xiaohua was slightly startled. He knew that this was a Confucian cultivator from Star-Lord Hall, who had a very good understanding of the Dao sect's nascent soul's hand. Whether it was the defensive formation or the ferocious beast, they all seemed to have the means to resist the restrictive power of the Dao sect. However, after Xiaohua was surprised, he sneered again. It was also a nascent soul's hand. Xiaohua didn't believe that this insignificant giant Tai Chi could escape from his nascent soul's hand. "Withdraw," Xiaohua snorted coldly. The magic power in his body surged. The giant palm flashed with a golden brilliance and once again exerted more force, crushing the green chi and the brilliance into pieces. Immediately after, Xiaohua's mind stretched out and tried to absorb the struggling Hui into his space. The giant Tai Chi was at least 100 zhang in size. Now, one of its hooves was vigorously kicking, and the tip of its horn was also sharp. Xiaohua's mind followed the nascent soul's hand and wrapped around the Hui. A tearing force that the giant Tai Chi couldn't resist was gradually born. Woo! The giant Tai Chi struggled with all its might for a moment. It seemed to be somewhat exhausted, and the hissing sound in its mouth also began to become hoarse. Just when Xiaohua's mind was set and he was preparing to think of a way to subdue the giant Tai Chi, suddenly, the surface of the giant Tai Chi's body flashed with thousands of dense inscriptions. What was even more strange was that the inscriptions near the mouth and nose of the giant Tai Chi were like ants pouring into the body of the giant Tai Chi. A fierce, destructive aura with a sense of despair was born out of thin air and frantically poured into the giant Tai Chi's mouth and nose. Not good. Xiaohua seemed to have realized something. He hurriedly pulled his mind out of the nascent soul's hand. At the same time, he withdrew his magic power and his divine sense. The nascent soul's hand instantly collapsed. Although Xiaohua saw the opportunity quickly, in the end, he was still a bit slower. When the giant Tai Chi escaped from the nascent soul's hand, it didn't escape like it usually did. Instead, it desperately struggled in the distance. It was even more miserable than when it was caught by the nascent soul's hand before. Boom! With a loud sound, the 100 zhang large giant Tai Chi exploded with a loud bang. Its flesh and blood mixed with a berserk aura rushed towards Xiaohua. Seeing that this unimaginable explosion didn't scatter in all directions, but instead directly rushed towards him, how could Xiaohua not know that this giant Tai Chi was another method that Confucian cultivators used to kill Dao cultivators? Although the explosion hadn't hit Xiaohua's body yet, Xiaohua's divine sense had already been affected by this strange explosion. His entire Naiwen palace shook, and an indescribable dizziness appeared in Xiaohua's mind. Xiaohua didn't care about hiding anything. He used the Devil Realm's concealing technique, and his figure quickly disappeared. However, he saw that the pitch-black brilliance in the air was slightly distorted. The impact of the explosion had already dispersed this distortion. When Xiaohua's figure appeared again, there was a slight anger on his face. He was originally very careful, but he really didn't expect that Confucian cultivators' methods were everywhere. This giant Tai Chi was not only a vicious beast that could kill gold core cultivators, but also a weapon that could kill nascent soul cultivators. Xiaohua, who was greedy for small gains, almost fell for a big trick. Moreover, as soon as Xiaohua's figure appeared, dozens of pillars of Aoran Qi appeared out of thin air and attacked Xiaohua for no reason. This Aoran Qi actually carried a kind of tyranny, as if Xiaohua was the enemy of the world.
Damn it.
Xiaohua suddenly woke up. This was Yaotai Mountain. If he used the Devil Realm's cultivation technique, wouldn't he be courting death? He hurriedly used the wind escape technique. His figure flashed, and he escaped far away. Only then did the vast Qi pillars scatter with a loud bang. In the air, that desolate aura gradually disappeared. The violent force destroyed the several hundred zhang mountain forest in the direction Xiaohua had been at. The original defensive formation had been completely destroyed. The white bones that Xiaohua saw just now were only a part of the cultivators who had died in the formation. Looking at the forest of white bones, Xiaohua's heart was touched again. After releasing Little Silver and Xiao Gua, Xiaohua spat out the true Samadhi fire, which turned into a fire net and burned all the white bones in the range of several li. After waiting for a while, Xiao Gua's face was full of pride. She brought back some spiritual herbs. These spiritual herbs were quite rare, and most of them weren't in Xiaohua's space. Hearing Little Silver's chirping in the distance, Xiaohua naturally knew what it had discovered. After landing, Xiaohua discovered that Little Silver was actually anxiously scurrying around in the ground. However, Little Silver, who had always been able to freely escape through the earth, was only able to escape a few inches underground before being unable to go any further.
Huh.
A strange expression appeared in Xiaohua's eyes. Forming a seal with his hands, he also tried to escape underground. However, he was only able to escape a few zhang underground before being unable to go any further. Confucian cultivators really have painstakingly operated this Yaotai Mountain for who knows how many years. I'm afraid that within several tens of thousands of li, the surface of the ground has been used with Confucian techniques. And it's possible that it's Taoist techniques. Xiaohua looked pensive. No Taoist cultivator can use the 5 elements escape technique to explore underground, and it's also impossible for them to escape underground. Thinking of this, Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "No need to go down. Let's see what's around us." Chirp, chirp. Little Silver replied a few times before running off in another direction. Not long after, it actually brought back some materials for refining tools, as well as a bloody horn. Wasn't that the horn of the giant hoe from before? Looking at the bloody horn, although Xiaohua didn't know what use this thing had, thinking about how this horn was able to pierce through his nascent soul's hand, he knew that it was definitely a good thing. Xiaohua put the horn into his space, then waved his nascent soul's hand to destroy all the trees within a few miles. Only then did he feel refreshed. Seeing that the sun didn't seem to move at all, Xiaohua's heart stirred. He beckoned with his hand, and wind blew under Little Silver's feet. Little Silver swung its grass-like tail and landed on Xiaohua's hand. Little Silver's tail naturally wrapped around Xiaohua's pinky finger. Chirp, 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 chirp. Little Silver stood up, clasped its 2 little paws in front of its face, and bowed to Xiaohua, as if asking what Xiaohua wanted to do. Xiaohua looked at Little Silver's appearance and was a little bewildered. When Little Yellow was here, he could faintly hear Little Silver's voice. Moreover, when Little Yellow and Little Black took the rejuvenation pill, Xiaohua didn't forget to give one to Little Silver. However, Little Yellow and Little Black could already speak, while Little Silver still couldn't speak. He didn't know if it was because Little Silver had eaten too many spirit herbs since childhood, or if Little Silver wasn't smart enough. Xiaohua regretted not letting Little Silver out to see what the Imperial Tutor's lot looked like before the Dragon Gate. When he described it to Little Silver at that moment, Little Silver tilted its head a little, and there was some confusion in its sparkling little eyes. Xiaohua could only stretch out a finger and point at the space between the little guy's eyebrows. In an instant, Little Silver's eyes lit up. It blinked its eyelids and sniffed its little nose. Its body flew out of Xiaohua's hand and it ran around in the air. To Xiaohua's surprise, after a while, the treasure-seeking mouse, which had always been known for its keen sense of smell, actually landed in his hand again. It raised its 2 little paws and spread its paws in a lifelike manner. If it wasn't for the fact that its shoulders were connected and it was extremely hard to distinguish, it would have shrugged its shoulders. Xiaohua rubbed his nose and understood that there were only 2 reasons why Little Silver couldn't find the Imperial Tutor's lot. One was that the closest Imperial Tutor's lot was beyond Little Silver's search range. The other was that the Imperial Tutor's lot had fallen inside the Imperial Array, which had completely concealed its aura. Chapter 3602. All right. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and flicked Little Silver's little butt with his middle finger. Go look for it, this old man will follow you. Before Xiaohua could finish speaking, Little Silver's nose suddenly twitched, and his body turned into a silver light as he flew off in a certain direction. Great! Overjoyed, Xiaohua hurriedly used his wind escape technique to chase after Little Silver, and at the same time, he released his soul consciousness in that direction. After flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they unexpectedly encountered two golden core cultivators. These two golden core cultivators were in a very sorry state and looked like they had just escaped from a defensive formation. When the two golden core cultivators saw Xiaohua and Little Silver, they were delighted. Seeing the joy in their eyes, how could Xiaohua not know what they were thinking? He coldly snorted and no longer concealed his cultivation. The pressure of a nascent soul cultivator suddenly gushed out, causing the two of them to be frightened to the point their faces turned deathly pale and they almost collapsed in the air. Xiaohua was too lazy to pay attention to them and directly flew after Little Silver. The two golden core cultivators dejectedly flew off in the opposite direction. It was just that as Little Silver flew, he stopped and looked around as if he couldn't find his way. Xiaohua smiled as he scooped Little Silver up and put him on his shoulder before continuing to fly forward. Not long after, the originally warm sunlight actually turned cold. Xiaohua saw two undulating mountain ranges appear in front of him. They looked very abrupt and were grayish-white in color. Hidden in the forest, they looked like two huge pythons biting each other as they surrounded a mountain stream with a radius of more than 10 li. There were no ancient trees in the mountain stream, only large craggy rocks of different sizes. Some were dozens of zhang tall, while others were several zhang tall. Wisps of cold air condensed into ice shards which were born in the mountain stream from time to time. Standing in midair, Xiaohua had already released his soul consciousness to scan the surroundings. He wasn't in a hurry to act, and only narrowed his eyes at the sun above his head. His gaze then fell on the two mountain ranges, as if he didn't care about the mountain stream at all. At that moment, a sharp wind suddenly blew just several zhang away from Xiaohua. This wind was extremely cold, and as soon as it appeared, it immediately swept up clusters of ice shards which flew toward Xiaohua. Little Silver, who was on Xiaohua's shoulder, suddenly quivered. His little nose twitched a few times, and he was about to fly toward the whirlwind. Come back! Xiaohua called out to Little Silver and then raised his head slightly to look at the mountain range opposite them. It was at this moment that Little Silver let out a shrill cry. Its small body suddenly curled up and the fur on its body exploded. Its two bright eyes were filled with vigilance as it looked at the mountain range just like Xiaohua. Above the mountain range, there were also two shadows. One was flying in front, and the other was following behind. The shadow in front was not big, but it was flying very fast. A moment later, a sharp divine sense swept over and swept past Xiaohua before landing on Little Silver. This divine sense was very strange. When Little Silver's divine sense locked onto it, he trembled and whimpered a few times. He didn't dare to stay in the air any longer and first flew to Xiaohua's shoulder. Then, feeling that it wasn't safe, he looked for Xiaohua's right hand and landed. His little tail tightly wrapped around Xiaohua's thumb, and he hid his little head between Xiaohua's 4 fingers. His entire body curled up, looking very scared. Xiaohua covered Little Silver with his hand as if to comfort him. He looked at where the shadow came from. When he saw it clearly, he saw that it was an ocelot several feet long. At this moment, the ocelot's eyes were narrowed into slits, and the yellow mark on its forehead that was very similar to the king character was particularly obvious. Behind the ocelot was another tall young cultivator. This cultivator looked very boorish, with a full beard, a pair of thick black eyebrows, leopard-like eyes, and a large mouth under his big nose. However, the cultivator's expression was rather arrogant, as if he was looking at the top of his head. Before he could fly closer, the middle nascent soul stage divine sense retracted from Little Silver's body and swept towards Xiaohua. At this moment, Xiaohua didn't hide his cultivation. The cultivator looked at Xiaohua with a trace of disdain and casually cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist, please. Xiaohua was a bit puzzled and cupped his hands. I am Xiaohua. Greetings. Fellow Taoist. I am Soaring Lake Country's fairy Xiangfeng. Junior brother. My Taoist name is Xiangtian. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't recognize him, the cultivator's face became even more disdainful. He nodded slightly and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's face is a bit unfamiliar, and I've never heard of your name. May I know which senior you work for?" Xiaohua smiled and said, "All right, Taoist Xianxia, I'm not working for any senior. I'm here to compete for the Imperial Tutor's lot at the Jade Pavilion meeting." "Oh, so you want to establish your own country?" Taoist Xianxia looked Xiaohua up and down and said thoughtfully, "Fellow Taoist Xiao has lofty ambitions. This old man admires you." I wouldn't dare. Seeing that Taoist Xiangtian's behavior was a bit strange, Xiaohua was puzzled and said with a smile. Xiangtian waved his hand and said, "Since you're here to compete for the Imperial Tutor's lot, there's no conflict with this old man. Forget it. This old man will give you some face." "How much is your spirit-seeking mouse worth?" "Give me some face?" "How much is a spirit-seeking mouse worth?" Xiaohua was stunned, but then he quickly realized and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiangtian, I'm very sorry. This spirit-seeking mouse is this Zhao's treasure." "I never thought." "Xiaohua." Taoist Xiangtian didn't wait for Xiaohua to finish and said coldly, "Could it be that you've never heard of Fairy Xiangfeng?" Xiaohua shook his head and said, "To be honest, this Xiao has never heard of it." "Good." Taoist Xiangtian nodded and said seriously, "Since fellow Taoist Xiao has never heard of Fairy Xiangfeng, then this old man will pretend that I didn't hear what fellow Taoist said. This spirit-seeking mouse is not bad. This old man will pay you 100 top-grade primal stones. Give it to this old man." Xiaohua smiled bitterly in his heart. This Reverend Xiangtian was already a mid-nascent soul-stage cultivator, but he was still so ignorant. Xiaohua really didn't know how he cultivated to mid-nascent soul stage. Oh, it should be said how he lived to mid-nascent soul stage. Not to mention 100 top-grade primal stones, this Xiao wouldn't exchange it even if it was 10 million. Xiaohua said indifferently, "If fellow Taoist Xiangtian doesn't have anything else, then this Xiao will enter the defensive formation." "Oh well." The ocelot suddenly let out a long howl in midair, and its golden fur puffed up like little silvers. It opened its eyes at the same time, and its gaze was like lightning as it looked at Little Silver. Little Silver let out a cry and tried to drill into the gap between Xiaohua's hands. Unfortunately, how big could the gap between Xiaohua's hands be? It was impossible for Little Silver to drill into it. Taoist Xiangtian's expression changed greatly. He reached out his hand to touch the Chenkuan bag on his waist, but he quickly put it down and said angrily, "Xiaohua, don't be so shameless. This old man has already made things clear for you. Hurry up and give this spirit-seeking mouse to this old man. Once this old man's ocelot devours this spirit-seeking mouse and grows up several times, this old man will tell Fairy Xiangfeng your name. Not to mention that you want to establish a country on the hidden immortal continent. Even if you want to cultivate to the late stage of nascent soul, this fairy can help you." Hearing that the ocelot wanted to devour Little Silver, Xiaohua suddenly realized why Little Silver was so scared. This ocelot should be the spirit-seeking mouse's natural enemy. Xiaohua coldly looked at the ocelot and then at Taoist Xiangtian. He said, "Fellow Taoist Xiangtian, this Xiao will treat your words as fart. If you want to enter the defensive formation, this Xiao won't stop you. But if you have other thoughts, don't blame this Xiao for being ruthless and not showing mercy." "Ha ha ha, not showing mercy?" Taoist Xiangtian laughed. "This old man has lived for thousands of years and those who dared to say such words to me have already turned into ashes. This old man really didn't expect someone to be so arrogant in this Jade Pavilion conference." Xiaohua was so angry that he laughed. He never thought that his first move in this Jade Pavilion conference would be against a Taoist cultivator. Seeing Taoist Xiangtian raise his hand to form a seal, Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He stretched out his hand and was about to release the spirit-killing light. Faced with this kind of cultivator who didn't know what was good for him, Xiaohua absolutely wouldn't show mercy. Who knew how many Taoist cultivators Taoist Xiangtian had killed before he met him? Ayo! The ocelot was clearly connected to Taoist Xiangtian. Its tail curled up like lightning and it raised its front paws and pounced at Little Silver in Xiaohua's hand. At this moment, a beast roar that was very similar to the ocelot's rang out in the distance, followed by a pleasantly surprised voice. "Fellow Taoist Xiao?" Taoist Xiangtian frowned slightly and stopped his hand seal. The surging vital qi of heaven and earth around him also stagnated. Xiaohua was also stunned. His hand stopped in midair. When the two of them looked up, they saw a white-browed nascent soul cultivator with a joyful expression on his face riding a two-headed monster flying towards them. Taoist Yuan Qing? Xiaohua immediately called out the name when he saw this nascent soul cultivator. However, when he looked around Taoist Yuan Qing, he didn't see Hai Hongzi or Hong Songzi.
Ayo!
While Xiaohua was thinking, the monster under Taoist Yuan Qing's feet opened its mouth and roared again. This monster looked like a python, but when it opened its mouth, it roared like an ocelot. Furthermore, when it roared, it spewed out a thick blue cloud. Taoist Xianxia's expression was a little strange, but the ocelot was very excited. It no longer looked at Little Silver, and instead roared at the two-headed monster.
Let's go!
Although Taoist Xianxia was domineering, he was still a nascent soul cultivator. When he clearly saw Taoist Yuan Qing's cultivation and the monster under him, he immediately made a decision. He no longer paid attention to Xiaohua, and with a shout, he flew towards the source of the sound. The ocelot, on the other hand, growled a few times unwillingly and followed Taoist Xianxia into the wind tunnel. Before it left, it even stuck out its scarlet tongue and licked its lips. But at this moment, Little Silver was showing off again. It actually raised its fat butt and shook it left and right in the air, and its small tail also swayed. It really wasn't clear whether its fear just now was real or just an act. Chapter 3603. Xiaohua watched Reverend Xianxia disappear with a cold smile on his face. Looking at the ocelot, he knew that Reverend Xianxia might not give up on killing him. Now that Reverend Xianxia saw that Xiaohua had come to help him, he didn't know the situation, and was avoiding him for the time being. Fellow Taoist Xiao, what's going on? Reverend Yuan Qing landed on the ground, and the two-headed monster shrank down to only a few feet long. It coiled around Reverend Yuan Qing's arm, and its four eyes flashed with a dark green light as it stared fixedly at Little Silver in Xiaohua's hand. But at that moment, Little Silver wasn't afraid at all. He wrapped his paws around his mouth and licked his little tongue before rubbing his face protectively a few times, as if he was washing his face. The most ridiculous thing was that after washing his face, Little Silver actually stood up and cupped his hands elegantly at Immortal Yuan Qing, as if he were a little person.
Ha ha!
Reverend Yuan Qing naturally knew what his pet was thinking. Seeing Little Silver like this, he laughed heartily and hit the two-headed monster on the forehead with his palm, shouting, "Evil creature, if you dare do that again, I'll pull out your tendons and skin you alive."
Oh!
The two-headed monster gave a low howl, looking very aggrieved. It shrank down again and hid its head behind Reverend Yuan Qing, not daring to look at Little Silver again. Xiaohua smiled slightly and rubbed Little Silver's head with his finger. He looked at Reverend Yuan Qing and said, "What else could it be? This so-called Reverend Xianxia just wants to attack me." He's Reverend Xianxia? Reverend Yuan Qing was blank for a moment before a strange expression appeared on his face. He looked meaningfully in the direction where Reverend Xianxia had disappeared, as if he had already heard of this Reverend Xianxia. Xiaohua was blank for a moment before he rubbed his chin and smiled. "Oh, fellow Taoist Yuan Qing. Do you know this guy?"
This guy.
Reverend Yuan Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is a nascent soul cultivator, but fellow Taoist Xiao actually calls him this guy. You really don't take a Taoist nascent soul cultivator seriously. Whether it's a golden core cultivator or a nascent soul cultivator, I respect all righteous people. For a thief who covets this Xiao's wealth, this Xiao called him a bastard is already enough. Xiaohua said with a deadpan expression. What if we tie up a late nascent soul stage cultivator? This late nascent soul stage cultivator regards this middle nascent soul stage cultivator as the apple of his eye? Reverend Yuanqing's words carried a hint of ridicule. Xiaohua blinked his eyes, thinking about Taoist Master Xianxia's big and burly appearance. In any case, she had nothing to do with Taoist Master Yuan Qing's beloved daughter. Taoist Yuan Qing looks at Xiaohua's somewhat dazed expression and seems to understand something. He says with a low laugh, "It seems that Taoist Xiao really hasn't heard the story of Taoist Xiangtian and Fairy Xiangfeng." Xiaohua shook his head. This Xiao has indeed never heard of it. However, if a pair of golden boy and jade girl cultivated to the nascent soul stage at the same time, then in my hidden immortal continent, it can be considered a beautiful story. Immortal Yuan Qing almost burst out laughing. He lowered his voice and said, They can't be called a golden couple but a golden couple. Golden boy and jade boy? Xiao Hua was rather astonished. He did not seem to understand what Reverend Yuan Qing was talking about. Taoist Yuan Qing laughs loudly. He pats the two-headed monster with his hand and yells, "Evil creature, quickly leave. Don't listen to some corner." Roar. The two-headed monster roars loudly and flies towards the place where Taoist Xianxia fell. Taoist Yuan Qing says to Xiao Hua with a smile, "Taoist Xiao, let's go in first. We'll talk as we walk." Xiao Hua asks curiously, "Didn't fellow Taoist Yuan Qing make an appointment with Hong Songzi and Hai Hongzi? Why did you come here yourself? Aren't you going to look for those two first?" "We did have an agreement. Moreover, the three of us also have a magic tool to communicate with each other. However, this magic tool can only respond within 100 miles. I have already searched several places but did not find any trace of those two. Now that we have met Taoist Xiao and the trace of a rare treasure, we naturally have to look for the rare treasure first. Actually, when I saw fellow Taoist, I already wanted to join hands with fellow Taoist. Unfortunately, Hai Hongzi did not agree and I had no other choice. Now, it seems that I still have fate with fellow Taoist Xiao." Xiao Hua nods and says, "Since that's the case, it's fine. This Xiao is aiming for the Imperial Preceptor's fortune while fellow Taoist Yuan Qing is aiming for the rare treasure. We don't conflict with each other and can cooperate." That's right, that's right. Taoist Yuan Qing glances at the place where the two-headed monster disappeared and says, "This defensive formation seems to be closing. Let's go in first. I also want to tell fellow Taoist the story of Fairy Xiangfeng and Taoist Xiangtian." "Good," Xiao Hua says with a smile. "Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, please go in first." Taoist Yuan Qing does not hold back. Since the two-headed monster did not give any warning, the entrance of the defensive formation was naturally not dangerous. He moves his body and enters the wind tunnel. At the same time, he tells Xiao Hua the story of Fairy Xiangfeng and Taoist Xiangtian in a low voice. Taoist Yuan Qing does not want to talk about it, but when he does, Xiao Hua feels disgusted. After all, Fairy Xiangfeng is not a real fairy but a male cultivator. However, she likes men and thinks of herself as a fairy, so she calls herself Fairy Xiangfeng after reaching the nascent soul stage. This Taoist Xiangtian is naturally Fairy Xiangfeng's exclusive property. Fairy Xiangfeng likes Taoist Xiangtian very much and uses all kinds of methods and elixirs to help Taoist Xiangtian reach the nascent soul stage. Under Fairy Xiangfeng's connivance, Taoist Xiangtian naturally does not look in anyone's eyes and can take whatever he wants. Others are afraid of Fairy Xiangfeng's power and can only be angry but do not dare to say anything. Damn it! Xiao Hua follows Taoist Yuan Qing into the formation and sees fog everywhere. Not only is he unable to see far with his naked eyes, even his spiritual sense feels like it is being corroded. He swings his arm as if to drive the fog away and says, "How can there be such a person in this world? It's simply filthy to the extreme. This Xiao is covered in goosebumps just listening to it." "Hee hee." Taoist Yuan Qing says with a smile, "There are countless strange people in this world, it's just that we don't know about them. You don't even know how ruthless Fairy Xiangfeng's methods are. No cultivator who falls into Fairy Xiangfeng's hands can come out alive. Even people who hear about his methods are disgusting. No one wants to offend him, and no one wants to fall into his hands." "Why is that?" Xiao Hua, of course, knows that Taoist Yuan Qing has not finished his words, so he asks hurriedly. Taoist Yuan Qing says, "Actually, Fairy Xiangfeng is also a pitiful person. Although he is very intelligent since he was a child, his fate is full of misfortunes. Before he became a baby, he encountered many disasters. As for what kind of disaster he encountered, it's impossible to know now, because all the people related to him were killed by him after he became a baby. I'm afraid it's because of his previous experience that he has such a strange hobby." This. Xiao Hua shakes his head slightly. "This person's temperament, I'm afraid, is already twisted." Roar! Just as Xiao Hua is speaking telepathically, he suddenly hears an angry roar. Taoist Yuan Qing's expression changes drastically when he hears it, and an embarrassed and angry voice bursts out from the bottom of his tongue. "Which blind little bastard dares to bully my Si Hong?" Saying this, Taoist Yuanqing doesn't have time to greet Xiao Hua, and his figure turns into a rainbow as he rushes in the direction of the monster Si Hong's angry roar. However, Reverend Yuanqing was truly infuriated. His entire body was flashing with a dark green brilliance. Wherever the rainbow touched, the dense fog would be pushed away. Moreover, the dense fog within a radius of a few feet to the left was frozen into wisps of sparkling and translucent fog, which then fell to the ground. Xiao Hua looks at Taoist Yuanqing's back and then at the icy fog, and a look of understanding flashes in his eyes. Since Taoist Yuanqing's target isn't the Imperial Preceptor's lot, then it must be the cold ghost Gaul. Roar roar. Taoist Yuanqing's figure disappears, and a series of roars can be heard in the distance. Although these sounds are very similar, Xiao Hua can clearly hear that they are the cries of the ocelot and Si Hong. At that moment, Little Silver, who is curled up in Xiao Hua's palm, suddenly stands up. He looks extremely excited, and points his little paw in front of him, urging Xiao Hua to speed up. Xiao Hua smiles slightly. His figure also sways, and he turns into a golden rainbow as he chases after Taoist Yuanqing. The distance between them is no less than several li. Before Xiao Hua can pass through the thick fog, roars can be heard one after another, and the thick fog surges even more. Xiao Hua doesn't need to release his soul sense to know that a fierce battle is taking place up ahead. Sure enough, Xiao Hua flew to a place where the fog was slightly thinner. Reverend Yuanqing was holding a small halberd that was about a foot long. His body flashed with an intense light, and his eyes were slightly red. He was vigilantly looking in front of him. On the other side of Reverend Yuanqing was Reverend Xianxia. Reverend Xianxia had a look of contempt on his face. He didn't bring out any magic treasures, and he didn't even look at Reverend Yuanqing. His gaze was fixed on the space between the two of them. Si Hong, who had taken out the two-headed monster, was fighting the ocelot. The ocelot is clearly more agile than Si Hong, and is also much more powerful. In the short time that Xiao Hua disappeared, the ocelot has already bitten several wounds on Si Hong's back. Thick blue blood seeped out from the wounds. While Si Hong was in pain, he seemed to have gone mad. His two snake-like heads roared and spat out aqua-blue venom towards the ocelot. Unfortunately, the ocelot dodged and spat out an earth-colored light from its mouth. Not only did it avoid the venom, but it also swept the venom back. Although the venom was powerful, even the surrounding fog would be corroded by the venom. However, it had no effect on the ocelot. When Xiao Hua appears, Taoist Xianxia immediately shifts his excited gaze away from the ocelot and coldly glances at Xiao Hua. Although he doesn't say anything, the warning in his eyes is obvious.
Ayo!
At this time, Si Hong's left head roars loudly. Suddenly, it grows 3 times larger and opens its mouth to bite down on the ocelot. The ocelot also roars loudly, and then actually pounces towards Si Hong's mouth. Si Hong was stunned for a moment, but soon after, he opened his other mouth and let out a roar. He twisted his neck in a strange manner and attacked the ocelot's tail from the bottom. Chapter 3604.
Hee hee.
A strange smile appeared on Reverend Xianxia's face. He shifted his gaze away from Xiao Hua and looked at the ocelot with excitement. Although Xiao Hua didn't know how powerful the ocelot was, he knew that Si Hong was about to suffer a great loss. Reverend Yuanqing's face was so gloomy that it seemed like it would drip water at any moment. Sure enough, when the head above Si Hong's head was about to pounce down at lightning speed and the sharp fangs in its mouth were revealed, the ocelot suddenly arched its back and slightly moved to the side when it was only a few feet away from Si Hong's head. Then, the tail that had been curled up behind its back suddenly stretched out and hit Si Hong's head with a paw sound. Si Hong's entire body instantly moved a few feet away. Si Hong's head only moved a few feet away from the ocelot in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Only the dark green poisonous fog brushed past half of the ocelot's body.
Ayo!
Si Hong's lower head was hit by the ocelot's tail and seemed to be a little dizzy. Si Hong's upper head couldn't be stopped in its tracks, and with a loud bang sound, the upper head couldn't close in time and bit down on the lower head. Not only that, the ocelot, which had just dodged the attack, once again streaked across the air. As it shook its head, its body suddenly expanded, and it bit down on the neck of Si Hong's head. In an instant, dark green blood flowed out from the wound. Si Hong was in great pain. His entire body twisted in midair and his long tail smashed down on the ocelot with the force of a mountain.
Ayo ayo.
The ocelot's throat roared and its tail flashed with brilliance as it rapidly expanded. It used all its strength to bite Xihong's neck and used its tail to attack Xihong. "How dare you, evil creature!" Reverend Yuan Qing activated the small halberd in his hand. The small halberd immediately emitted a brilliant light and a python-like shadow emerged from the runes on the halberd. It seemed like it would turn into a dragon and attack as soon as it left his hand. In the distance, Reverend Xianxia's face turned dark red and his eyes flashed with passion. He looked up at Reverend Yuan Qing and said coldly, "Animals fight among themselves. If someone disturbs us, don't blame this old man for not treating you as a human." Reverend Yuan Qing bit his lip as if he was enduring and waiting for help, but he didn't look at Xiao Hua. At this moment, Little Silver's tail in Xiao Hua's hand was released from Xiao Hua's thumb. That little claw slightly scratched Xiao Hua's palm, as if it wanted to move. Xiao Hua's heart thumped and he flicked Little Silver's butt with his middle finger. Little Silver actually immediately understood Xiao Hua's meaning. Wind stirred up under his feet as he flew in the direction of the ocelot and Xihong. Compared with the ocelot's and Xihong's imposing and Xiao Hua's body, it was pitifully small and pitifully weak. Reverend Yuan Qing's when he saw Xiao, little Yuan Qing's. Little to Xiangtian, Reverend Yuan Qing. Seeing Xiao Hua make a move, Reverend Yuan Qing was reassured. He didn't think that Little Silver could do anything, but he was sure that Xiao Hua wouldn't just stand by and watch. Knowing this, Reverend Yuan Qing suddenly attacked with the small halberd in his hand. With a cold aura and a dazzling splendor, the small halberd streaked through the air. The tip of the halberd lengthened as it pierced the space between the ocelot's eyebrows. "How dare you!" Reverend Xiangtian had been on guard for a long time. He roared angrily and his whole body trembled as if he was extremely excited. He opened his mouth and a flying sword turned into 10,000 winter plum blossoms and shot into the air. Seeing that the battle between the two nascent soul cultivators was about to break out, Xiao Hua put his hand on his waist as if to take out some magic treasure from his Chengkuan bag. But at that moment, Little Silver, who had already flown to the edge of the battle between the ocelot and Xihong, abruptly turned into a thin silver light and charged straight for the ocelot's back. He was faster than lightning, and furthermore, he didn't make the slightest sound. Xiao Hua was stunned, Reverend Yuan Qing was stunned, and Reverend Xiangtian was also stunned. The magic treasures of the two nascent soul cultivators froze in midair. The ocelot was now locked in a stalemate with Xihong and couldn't pay too much attention to it. However, the ocelot had also sensed Little Silver's attack, and its body immediately emitted a layer of earthy yellow light. This light was surrounded by wisps of demon fog, and its brocade fur stood straight up, each strand flashed with light. Swish! It was like a stubborn stone thrown into the water, and the ripples didn't seem to have the power to resist it. Little Silver pounced on the ocelot's back. Whether it was the defensive light, the sizzling demon fog, or the brocade fur, they couldn't resist Little Silver's bite at all. Little Silver's body sank into the ocelot's back. "Oh!" The ocelot cried out in pain. Before it could pull its mouth away from Xihong's neck, there was a flash of silver light in front of its chest, and Little Silver actually flew out from there. As soon as Little Silver flew out, the ocelot immediately went limp in midair. Pa! There was a crisp sound as Xihong's tail hit the ocelot's forehead. Its head was smashed to smithereens, and its entire body fell from midair. The whole process took only a few breaths. Not only was Reverend Yuan Qing in disbelief, even Xiao Hua himself felt that it was a little inconceivable. "Oh!" Reverend Xiangtian let out a roar similar to an ocelot's. The cold plum blossom flying sword shone brightly, and the pressure of a middle nascent soul cultivator soared into the sky from the top of Reverend Xiangtian's head. Reverend Xiangtian was furious. At that moment, Xiao Hua's unhurried and cold voice rang out. "Animals fight among themselves. If someone disturbs us, don't blame this old man for not treating them as human beings." Seeing Reverend Xiangtian's anger, Reverend Yuan Qing's heart turned cold. The small halberd magic treasure was about to rush into the air, but when he heard Xiao Hua say the exact same thing as Reverend Xiangtian, he couldn't help but laugh. "You brat!" Reverend Xiangtian was even more furious, and he pounced on Xiao Hua in fury. Reverend Xiangtian had actually abandoned Reverend Yuan Qing and wanted to kill Xiao Hua, As soon as Reverend Xianxia's pressure was released, it immediately stirred up the clouds, and the thick fog within a radius of several hundred feet was swept away. Xiao Hua sneered, and with a flip of his hand, he was about to hit his own head. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Rumble! The space within a radius of more than 10 miles was filled with thunderbolts, and a thick righteous qi was generated from all directions, falling towards Taoist Xianxia. An aura akin to the might of the heavens was born from this wave of awe-inspiring qi. Not only did it envelop Reverend Xianxian, but it also enveloped Xiao Hua and Reverend Yuanqing, as well as several tens of kilometers around them. Reverend Xianxian's pressure had triggered the restrictions of the defensive formation. But that wasn't the end of it. The thick fog within several tens of kilometers was dispersed by the awe-inspiring qi, revealing the true appearance of the defensive formation. Below Xiao Hua and the others, icy ponds appeared one after another. Icy rivers that were as thin as palm prints also appeared. The dense fog actually came from the icy ponds and icy rivers. At this moment, there were still wisps of fog rushing into the air. Following the appearance of the defensive formation was a group of cultivators scattered around the glacial ponds and glacial ponds. There were at least a dozen of these cultivators, and aside from the nascent soul cultivator furthest away from Xiaohua and the others, the rest were all gold core cultivators. These cultivators' qi was affected by the awe-inspiring qi, and they had no choice but to release their pressure and magic treasures to resist with all their might. Some of the weaker ones were even knocked to the ground by the awe-inspiring qi. The thick fog dispersed, and Xiao Hua and the others recovered their divine sense. With a sweep of their divine sense, the group of cultivators unconsciously focused their attention on a cliff at the edge of the space. They saw a ball of two-colored light flickering there, and even the divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator couldn't see it clearly. The aura of the strange treasure was coming from this ball of light. Xiao Hua and the others were some distance away from the strange treasure, but the other nascent soul cultivator wasn't too far away. Just as they discovered the strange treasure, the nascent soul cultivator's body turned into a rainbow, and he charged towards the strange treasure as fast as lightning, shattering the awe-inspiring qi along the way. Damn it! The culprit who triggered the defensive formation, Taoist Soaring Heaven, was furious and cursed. The flying sword in the air was too late to attack Xiao Hua, so it hurriedly turned around and flew towards the nascent soul cultivator like a blooming plum blossom. From the looks of it, it seemed like it wanted to snatch the strange treasure from the nascent soul cultivator. Damn it, this bastard. Isn't he just courting death? Xiao Hua's palm stopped in midair, and he couldn't help but ridicule Taoist Soaring Heaven, who was almost 20% faster than the nascent soul cultivator. Taoist Yuanqing didn't dare to put away the small halberd. He pointed his finger, and the small halberd flew back to the top of his head to protect him. Then, he waved his sleeve and put away the heavily injured two-headed monster Si Hong. He coldly said, "Although we are mid-nascent soul cultivators, in this bastard's eyes, we are no different from early nascent soul cultivators. Not to mention the three of us, even if two more came, he would still be the same. Today, if we don't join forces to kill him, we won't be able to leave Yaotai Mountain. Even if we can avoid Taoist Soaring Heaven, we won't be able to escape Fairy Soaring Feng." Xiao Hua faintly smiled and opened his hand. The happy little silver flew back into his palm. Its claws were still digging into its mouth, as if it had eaten its fill and was cleaning its mouth. Looking at little Silver's body, there wasn't the slightest bit of blood or filth. "What do you think, fellow Taoist Xiao?" Seeing the mysterious smile on Xiao Hua's face, Taoist Yuanqing couldn't figure out what Xiao Hua was thinking. He had no choice but to get straight to the point. Taoist Soaring Heaven's ocelot was indeed killed by Eyes Si Hong, but in the end, it was still killed by fellow Taoist's pet. "Oh, Taoist, I don't want to tie Taoist together with me. I am very happy that Taoist was able to take action at the critical moment. Since that's the case, let's kill him." Xiao Hua's expression didn't change and he didn't explain anything. Taoist Yuanqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He cupped his hands and said, "Oh, Taoist Xiao, if it were that easy, would I have needed to say so much in front of you? If Taoist I really want it, then let's hurry over. This strange treasure. I don't want it anymore. I'll give it to that fellow Taoist in front of me. Of course, if Taoist wants it, then the three of us can join forces to kill him." Chapter 3605. Alright, let's do as Taoist Yuanqing says. Xiao Hua nodded. He looked very relaxed as if he was about to swat a mosquito. Taoist Yuan Qing wasn't as calm as Xiao Hua. He had heard of Fairy Xiang Feng's fame and felt that Xiao Hua was underestimating Taoist Xiang Tian. He wanted to say a few more words, but when he saw that Taoist Xiang Tian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator were about to approach, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly moved his halberd and chased after Taoist Xiang Tian. When Taoist Yuan Qing chased after him, there was a strange look in his eyes. However, Taoist Yuan Qing's figure had only moved a few hundred meters when suddenly, the sound of a pipa appeared in the air. This pipa sound was very strange. It was low and deep like raindrops, falling directly into people's hearts. Soon after, the raindrops became as big as a bucket and continued to crackle. After a few breaths of time, the pipa sound suddenly became louder. It was like an eagle striking the sky, producing the sound of a golden spear. Not good. The defensive formation has been activated. Not only Xiao Hua, but all the cultivators within a few dozen kilometers were awakened by the sound of the battle. Xiao Hua was especially shocked. The true qi in his chest was stirred up by the unspeakable pipa sound. In a trance, he seemed to see iron horses roaring from the ice river. The iron horses' hooves instantly crushed the space. Golden Spear Iron Horse. Xiao Hua calmed down and immediately stabilized his true qi. He couldn't help but think of Lang Chinga's Golden Spear Iron Horse formation. Sure enough, as the sound of the pipa reverberated through the entire space, a vast amount of awe-inspiring qi rushed into the cold pond and the ice river. Countless battle-intense and cold air rushed out from the ice river. Waves of inscriptions stirred in the ice river and the cold pond. Then, pairs of war horses rushed out from the ice river and the cold pond.
See.
Xiao Hua, who had seen the 5 brocade cloud painting before, couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when his divine sense swept across these war horses. These war horses that were formed from ice were all soldiers and generals wearing ice armor. These soldiers and generals were surrounded by an incomparably noble and cold aura. Furthermore, the weapons in their hands seemed to be both tangible and intangible at the same time. The aura of these war horses was several times stronger than Lang Chinga's Golden Spear Iron Horse formation. Moreover, there was an endless stream of cavalry emerging from the ice river. There seemed to be no end to it.
Oh no!
Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but worry for those golden core cultivators. 1 or 2 battle riders might not be able to catch the eye of a gold core cultivator, but 100 or 1,000 of them could definitely take the life of a gold core cultivator, not to mention that many of these gold core cultivators were still resisting the heavenly might of the defensive formation. Xiao Hua's worries were not superfluous. Not far from where Xiao Hua's divine sense swept past, a Jindan cultivator who was doing his utmost to resist the heavenly might of the imperial formation saw several armored horses galloping on the ice river approaching. Immediately, his entire body flashed with a splendor, and a magic weapon that looked like a silver moon spat out from his mouth. The silver moon was like a blade, and when the splendor flew past, those armored horses were instantly shattered into pieces. The charging horses turned into ice and fell to the ground. However, without waiting for this gold core cultivator to catch his breath, another dozen or so ice spears emerged from the cold pond. Before he could even see the armored horses behind the ice spears, those ice spears shot towards the gold core cultivator like meteors. The gold core cultivator's figure slightly swayed, as if his pressure was shaken by the heavenly might of the formation. Soon after, his head also shook, and it seemed as if countless armored horses had appeared before his eyes. When the ice spears approached him, that cultivator let out a loud roar. The silver moon magic weapon flashed again, and the dozen or so ice spears were easily destroyed. Even when the magic weapon rushed into the ice river, it brought with it 10,000 drops of frost, and the armored horses that were unable to charge out were also destroyed in one strike. The gold core cultivator caught his breath, and thick clouds immediately appeared beneath his feet. The clouds carried the cultivator's body and flew straight into the air. However, after flying for several meters, whoosh! Several ice spears shot out from the thick clouds beneath his feet. They very strangely stabbed towards the gold core cultivator's lower body. The gold core cultivator turned pale with fright. Only now did he understand that these weapons and armored horses could be produced from any kind of fog. Even his magic cloud technique was not spared. Fortunately, this gold core cultivator was alert enough. He had already realized that something was wrong. He hurriedly turned his body into the wind, and used the Dao Sex flying technique to hastily dodge.
Pu.
Several muffled sounds rang out. Several spears were shattered, and the gold core cultivator was also pierced by 2 of the ice spears. However, the gold core cultivator's body shone with golden light. The ice spears only managed to pierce his defensive magic weapon, and they were broken again.
Just as this gold core cultivator was still in shock, and his heart had just started to feel lucky, a clump of cold air once again strangely appeared a few feet in front of his head.
This time, the gold core cultivator was prepared. He looked very calm. With a wave of his big sleeve, "Kocha" sounds rang out. Several Dao weapons broke on his iron-like Dao robe. Of course, there were still several ice spears that managed to slip through the net and hide outside of these relatively powerful divine abilities. The gold core cultivator's body shone with golden light again. Clearly, he wanted to block these ice spears. However, when the ice spears pierced the golden light, the gold core cultivator's complexion changed greatly. Without waiting for him to stir up his true essence again, or activate his silver moon magic weapon, one of the ice spears pierced his chest. The gold core cultivator let out a blood-curdling scream. His corporeal body floated down like a withered leaf. The ice spear that sneak attacked him just now, like the other spears and halberds, sank into the cold air and disappeared without a trace. In just a short moment, the gold core cultivator controlling the formation was suppressed, his soul suppressed, his spirit attacked, and his life was taken away.
The hundreds of years of hard work he had put into cultivating turned into flowing water.
A strand of wandering soul calmly disappeared.
Hiss.
Xianxia could clearly see from high up in the sky that the killing ice spear was no different from the other ice spears. His divine sense was unable to distinguish it at all. Seeing the gold core cultivator fall so easily, Xianxia hastily opened his transcendence vision. With one glance, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air.
This was because within the countless mist, there were actually many immortal weapons wielding ice spears that would occasionally appear from the fog of the defensive formation.
After killing a gold core cultivator with one strike, they would immediately disappear into the formation. It was as if they were dragging mud and water. It was truly incomparably mysterious. Within this defensive formation, more than half of the gold core cultivators had already fallen in a short moment. The other gold core cultivators saw that the situation was far from good and hurriedly protected themselves with all their might. At the same time, they also used Dao sect flying techniques to get closer to Taoist Master Xianxia and the other nascent soul cultivators, hoping to use this opportunity to escape. As for Taoist Master Xianxia, how could he care about these gold core cultivators? Taoist Master Xianxia's magic power surged all over his body and sword light shot out, sweeping everything in its path. All the ice spears and iron horses were cut down and unparalleled momentum rushed towards the treasure. At this moment, the nascent soul cultivators in the distance also felt Taoist Master Xianxia's killing intent. They sped up, wanting to snatch the jade box before Taoist Master Xianxia could. Of course, they didn't care about the sneak attacks of the immortal weapons around them.
Damn it.
Xianxia was inwardly annoyed by the ruthless methods of this Confucian cultivator.
He cursed and urged his body to catch up to Taoist Master Yuanqing. Xiaohua's speed was naturally far superior to Taoist Master Yuanqing's. Although he didn't use the lightning escape technique, he had already surpassed Taoist Master Yuanqing in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Yuanqing was stunned, but a smile appeared on his face. The stronger Xiaohua was, the better it would be for him. The two of them would have more chances to kill Taoist Master Xianxia if they joined hands. However, Taoist Master Yuanqing was puzzled because after Xiaohua passed him, he didn't directly attack Taoist Master Xianxia. He also didn't try to snatch the treasure. Instead, he flew down between him and Taoist Master Xianxia. Xiaohua waved his hands and shot out a series of incantations. The space within 1,000 feet of Taoist Master Yuanqing began to tremble rapidly. Strands of cold air were shattered and the pillars of Taoist Master Yuanqing's qi were also destroyed. A golden light flashed and half of the golden scissors rushed into the air.
Ah!
Miserable screams sounded and several broken limbs wearing immortal armor fell into the fog in the distance.
Too fierce. Taoist Master Yuanqing was flabbergasted. As the saying goes, when an expert shows his hand, you can tell whether he is an expert or not. Although this saying was very vulgar, it was very appropriate to use it on Xiaohua. Taoist Master Yuanqing had overestimated Xiaohua, But that overestimation was far from Xiaohua's fierceness. Taoist Master Yuan Qing was well aware of the limitations the defensive formation had on Dao sect cultivators. He could easily cast the confinement of 1,000 feet outside the Yaotai mountain, but inside the defensive formation, it was already a miracle that he was able to confine a few thousand feet. Otherwise, he wouldn't have desperately chased after Taoist Master Xiangtian, and Taoist Master Xiangtian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator wouldn't have had to desperately rush to the cliff where the treasure was. Normally, a nascent soul cultivator would be able to snatch the treasure within a dozen or so miles. Even if they used a flying technique, they would be able to snatch it in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Yuan Qing was pleasantly surprised and his expression changed once again. The magic power in Xiaohua's body surged and the safe area that Xiaohua's magic power restricted was constantly expanding. The golden core cultivator next to the immortal soldier who had just been killed was already at the edge of the safe area. It wasn't until now that Taoist Master Yuan Qing realized what Xiaohua was thinking. He really didn't understand. After all, that golden core cultivator wasn't Wu Tian or Chong Yu. Of course, Xiaohua's actions only made Taoist Master Yuan Qing respect him and trust him even more. He only urged his magic power to chase after Taoist Master Xiangtian, who was already close to the treasure. He didn't believe that Xiaohua, who could save an ordinary golden core cultivator, wouldn't forget about him, a nascent soul cultivator that he had befriended.
Rumble.
At that moment, Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure collided. Countless waves of qi surged out, and the fog that had been dispersed by the pillars of qi began to wreak havoc once again. Although the defensive formation borrowed the power of the heavens and was extremely powerful, the collision between two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators still caused the formation to shake a few times. The dozens of pillars of qi were once again shattered.
Not good.
Perhaps the bystanders were surprised by the fierceness of the battle between the two nascent soul cultivators, but Xiaohua inwardly cursed, because as the defensive formation trembled, even more cold air and armored horses were born from the void. The few Jindan cultivators who were lucky enough to survive had just seen the dawn of life, but in a short moment, they were submerged by these armored horses. The battle between two nascent soul cultivators had indirectly taken the lives of several golden core cultivators. Chapter 3606. Seeing this, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. During the trip to Yaotai Mountain, Li Xiang had made it clear that they had to hide their strength and keep a low profile. Although Li Xiang might not have seen the immortal weapons hidden in the fog, he also knew that the Confucian cultivators would not easily let the Taoist cultivators go. Xiaohua rashly wanted to save these Jindan cultivators and display his superhuman skills, but at this time, he really did not have the strength to do so. Several Jindan cultivators were scattered around the Great Formation. He had only used the soaring dragon shears to kill a dozen immortal weapons. Just as he was about to use his Yuanying hand to cover the nearest Jindan cultivator, there was a sound of surging waves. Countless ice currents flashing with an extremely cold aura appeared all around the Great Formation. One by one, ice cavalrymen, several zhang tall, strangely protruded from the ice currents. Streams of vast qi once again rumbled and poured into these ice cavalrymen. Streaks of azure light seeped out from these ice cavalrymen. The azure dragon saber that they wielded was more powerful than any magic tool. Cracks appeared in the void as it flashed out. Even the magic treasures of Jindan cultivators could not achieve such an effect. The Confucian cultivators had gradually released their means. When these ice cavalrymen appeared, the Jindan cultivators were all greatly shocked. Their faces were ashen, and their hearts were filled with despair. Previously, the iron glacier armor had already beaten them to a pulp. Now, the ice cavalrymen were several times more powerful than the iron glacier armor. The Jindan cultivator's fighting spirit was completely gone, especially the Jindan cultivator near Xiaohua's confinement area. He completely gave up resisting and only wanted to be protected by Xiaohua. After Xiaohua used the soaring dragon shears to kill a dozen ice cavalrymen, he really could no longer take care of this cultivator who had lost all fighting spirit. The ice cavalryman suddenly thrust forward, and an ice spear that was 100 times colder than ice pierced deeply into his back. Even the Jindan cultivator who was about to self-destruct was suppressed by this coldness. His entire body turned into an ice sculpture and fell to the ground. Not only that, but these cold currents that were like the eruption of an icy river instantly appeared everywhere within the imperial formation that spanned dozens of kilometers. Ice spears that were comparable to Jindan stage cultivators strangely appeared from the void. Even within the space that Xiaohua had just sealed, the powerful imperial formation's heavenly might tore apart the restriction inch by inch. At the places where the restriction was torn apart, strands of icy currents appeared like blood clots. Hundreds of ice spears appeared along with the appearance of the ice cavalry, and each ice spear stabbed towards Xiaohua like flying swords. Xiaohua had no time to care about himself, let alone the several Jindan stage cultivators. After the ice spear appeared, they all died in the time it took to drink a cup of tea. Reverend Xianxia and the nameless Yuanying, who were charging towards the ancient treasure, were surrounded by ice cavalry just like Xiaohua. These ice cavalry blocked their path, and even with all sorts of divine abilities, they were unable to kill these ice cavalry. Xiaohua naturally had to resort to trickery. Although the Dharma eye between his eyebrows was not particularly obvious, it was still slightly open. After all, Confucian cultivators were very proficient in using deception tactics, so Xiaohua naturally could not be careless.
Sure enough, after a dozen ice cavalry arrived, an immortal general that was several times stronger than the ice cavalry rushed out of the icy water with an ice cavalry in his hand.
With a whistle, he stabbed towards Xiaohua like the other ice cavalry.
Unfortunately, although this immortal general did not show his face, his filthy thoughts could not be exposed to the light of day.
Xiaohua also did not seem to notice. He casually waved his Taoist robe and scattered most of the ice spears. A few ice cavalry powerlessly pierced the golden light protecting Xiaohua's body. Seeing the ice spears pierce Xiaohua's armpits, the immortal general raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he was happy. Unfortunately, his eyebrows seemed to have stopped there and could no longer be raised. At this moment, Xiaohua suddenly shook his hand and a wishful staff appeared in his hand. The wishful staff whistled through the air, flashing past the ice spears and smashing into the immortal general's head. The immortal general did not understand how he had died under Xiaohua's hands. This staff was too strange. No one would have imagined it. When Xiaohua encountered such an obstruction, there was no need to mention Taoist Shengtian, Taoist Yuanqing, and the nameless nascent soul cultivator. There were even more cold currents near the strange treasure. Before Taoist Yuanqing could catch up to Taoist Shengtian, he was blocked by many ice cavalry and had no choice but to use his small halberd to meet them. The ice cavalry and ice spears might be the appetizer for these nascent soul cultivators, but the immortal general hidden among the ice cavalry was the appetizer. Several times, the three nascent soul cultivators were almost stabbed by the immortal general. How could the three nascent soul cultivators not know that something was wrong? Reverend Xiangtian hurriedly slapped his hand on the door above him, causing a cluster of green light to shoot up into the air. The green light transformed into countless sword lights that rained down like a fountain, enveloping the space several hundred feet around Reverend Xiangtian. These sword lights were filled with sword shadows and chilling intent. They strangled the ice river and frost inch by inch, not allowing the ice cavalry to appear again. Reverend Xiangtian did the same. Reverend Yuanqing and the nameless nascent soul cultivator did the same. One of them unleashed a water-colored light that looked like a boat in the ocean to protect himself, while the other condensed a huge spindle-shaped magic treasure to shield himself. Neither the ice spears nor the cavalry could break through their defense. Seeing the few gold core cultivators inside the defensive formation fall into the ice river one after another, Xiaohua sighed and withdrew his magic power. He used his divine sense to urge the soaring dragon shears to sweep away the ice spears and ice cavalry that came out of the ice river. The wishful staff in his hand also danced and flew toward Taoist Shengtian and the others. For a moment, the entire defensive formation was in a stalemate with the four nascent soul cultivators. Although there were still dozens of ice rivers within the defensive formation, the ice rivers seemed to be helpless against the defenses of the four nascent soul cultivators. Seeing that the previous defense was effective, Taoist Shengtian immediately urged his flying sword to rush toward the treasure while the nameless nascent soul cultivator used his nascent soul hand to grab the treasure. Seeing this, Taoist Master Yuanqing knew that this was an excellent opportunity. Almost without hesitation, he activated the small halberd. Streaks of crystalline thunderbolts flashed in the air, shattering countless ice spears. Like the nameless nascent soul attacking Taoist Master Shengtian from both sides, the halberd fell towards Taoist Master Shengtian's back.
You dare!
Taoist Shengtian coldly smiled and pointed his finger at the flying sword. The flying sword let out a whistling sound and instantly grew in size.
It was originally flying toward the treasure, but it strangely changed direction and directly chopped toward the nameless nascent soul hand. Moreover, the momentum of this change was as heavy as a mountain, as if Taoist Xianxia had already planned for this. The nameless nascent soul's expression changed slightly. He knew that this was a diversion tactic, but at this point, the nameless nascent soul had no choice but to face it head-on. Looking at the smug expression on Reverend Xiangtian's face, he opened his mouth slightly.
Web.
He spat out a mouthful of clear air, and a cauldron the size of a thumb flew into the air. Following his chanting, a dozen huge pillars of origin energy rose from the mouth of the cauldron and landed on the cauldron with a sound no less powerful than that of the pillars of origin energy.
Wang.
After the cauldron received the origin energy pillars, it shined brightly like a meteor and blocked the small halberd that was about to transform into a dragon. Rumble. In an instant, Taoist Xiangtian used his flying sword to split open the nameless nascent soul hand and the cauldron to block Taoist Yuanqing's small halberd magic treasure. With a loud sound, the entire defensive formation violently trembled. Whether it was the ice river or the mist, they were all violently tumbling, causing Taoist Yuanqing to feel extremely bitter. Although he had overestimated Taoist Xiangtian, this overestimation was not enough. They were both mid-stage nascent soul cultivators, but Taoist Xiangtian was able to fight against two of them with ease. Taoist Yuanqing didn't know what the nameless nascent soul cultivator was feeling. He only knew that his qi and blood were surging and the magic power in his body was tumbling like the ice river. A sharp sound seemed to be coming from his ears. Along with this sound, the sound of the pipa in the defensive formation reached its peak and soared into the sky. I can't let Taoist Xiangtian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator join forces. I must join forces with Xiaohua to kill Taoist Xiangtian. This was the only thought in Taoist Yuanqing's mind. At the same time, he didn't care too much. While urging his magic power, his halberd flashed with an unusually strong brilliance. He desperately rushed towards Taoist Xiangtian's cauldron. At the same time, he transmitted his voice to Xiaohua, preparing to join forces with them to attack. However, the mist and ice river in the defensive formation were tumbling madly. The sound was loud and chaotic, and the noble qi was like a giant python that was slithering chaotically. Taoist Yuanqing was unable to transmit his voice.
Oh no!
Taoist Yuanqing's heart suddenly shuddered and he had an ominous feeling. As soon as this feeling appeared, the entire defensive formation suddenly fell silent. All the sounds of the pipa, the river of ice, and the roaring of the vast pillar of qi strangely disappeared, like the waning of the night. In this moment of extreme silence, Taoist Xiangtian's cold plum blossom flying sword rushed out of the ice river and once again turned into a big plum blossom hand to grab the strange treasure on the cliff.
Damn it!
The big hand only rose a few feet, but Xiaohua's angry voice was heard. The entire defensive formation was filled with the sound of thunder. Xiaohua turned into a bolt of lightning and streaked across the sky, pouncing towards Taoist Xiangtian's big plum blossom hand to stop him.
Whoa!
In the midst of the thunder, a wisp of flute sound came from an unknown place. Although it was clear, it was extremely penetrating, and Xiaohua's thunder was unable to cover it. Along with this flute sound, the entire defensive formation was suddenly filled with a burst of weak wind from all over. When Taoist Xiangtian saw Xiaohua using the thunder escape technique, he was shocked. He pointed his finger at the cauldron and dodged Taoist Yuanqing's halberd, which suddenly grew several times larger and fell towards Xiaohua's head. Although Xiaohua's thunder escape technique was extremely fast, the cauldron produced a huge suction force, and he had to pass through it. Xiaohua sneered and waved the wishful staff in his hand. In the eyes of Taoist Xiangtian, the wishful staff inconceivably grew longer and bigger and hit the cauldron. The cauldron was no longer under Taoist Xiangtian's control and began to tumble in the air.
Chapter 3608.
Taoist Xiangtian. Xiaohua waved the wishful staff and shouted angrily. Can't you see? Every time you fight someone, you cause a change in the defensive formation, and each change is stronger than the last. You've already caused more than 10 golden core cultivators to die in the defensive formation.
Do you want to drag us down with you?
Xiaohua's voice was extremely loud. It sounded like a thunderclap inside the defensive formation. When Reverend Yuanqing heard it, he couldn't help but feel shaken. He was immediately stunned. This How could this Xiao Hua possibly speak inside the defensive formation?
Taoist Xiao.
Taoist Yuan Qing hastily said, but as he thought, even though his voice contained magic power, it still couldn't reach far. It was at this moment that the flute sound in the defense formation suddenly became sharp. The weak wind that was generated earlier suddenly intensified. The weak wind was more powerful than any magic weapon. When it blew on Immortal Yuan Qing's body, the golden light that protected his body was extinguished in a visible manner. Not only that, but the light on Ming Hao's halberd was also flickering rapidly. A feeling of friction between the halberd and the sand was transmitted from Ming Hao's halberd. Even the magic treasure couldn't withstand the weak wind of the defensive array.
Not good.
Taoist Yuan Qing's expression changed and he opened his mouth. A blue bead rushed into the air, and a watery brilliance fell, completely covering Taoist Yuan Qing. In the weak wind, a string of small bubbles appeared on the surface of the light. The bubbles popped and popped like boiling water. Even though the water bead couldn't completely resist the weak wind, Taoist Yuan Qing let out a long sigh of relief. He reached out to grab Ming Hao's halberd, but when he tried to use his magic power, the weak wind blocked his magic power. Ming Hao's halberd flashed a few times, and like a wanderer unwilling to turn back, it only struggled to return several feet. Taoist Yuan Qing had no choice but to use his flying light to fly in the direction of Ming Hao's halberd. At this moment, the expressions of Reverend Xianxia and the nameless cultivator changed slightly. Reverend Xianxia was shocked by Xiao Hua's divine ability, and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. In the end, Reverend Xianxia didn't dare to act rashly and recalled the cold plum blossom flying sword and the cauldron. In just a moment, half of the cold plum blossom flying sword had been blown away by the wind, causing Reverend Xianxia to be shocked. The nameless cultivator seemed to have been prepared for this. Seeing his magic weapon being corroded by the weak wind, he didn't seem surprised, but when he heard Xiao Hua's voice, he was greatly alarmed. He opened his mouth and a pale white bead flew into the air. The bead's brilliance didn't cover a large area, only a few dozen feet in size, but within this area, not a single weak wind could be produced.
Air-frozen bead?
Reverend Xiangtian's eyes lit up. The flying sword seemed to be greedy, and it shrank a few times in the air before returning to his hand. This was because at this moment, Xiao Hua, who Reverend Xiangtian was most unsure of, had arrived. Although the golden light around Xiao Hua's body flickered slightly in the wind, as if it was being eroded by the wind, Xiao Hua's flying speed was much faster than before. Although it couldn't compare to the lightning evasion technique, in the eyes of Reverend Xiangtian, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. After all, Xiao Hua was his enemy and not his friend.
All of you stop.
After several changes in the defensive formation, Xiao Hua was finally able to say these words in front of the two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators. If anyone dares to act rashly again, this Xiao will immediately kill them. With that, Xiao Hua's eyes swept over Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless cultivator like lightning. Reverend Xiangtian flew into a rage and the flying sword in his hand flew into the air again. His previous misgivings were thrown far away as he loudly shouted, "Brat, what qualifications do you have to order this old man around? What divine ability do you have to kill this old man?
What if I join in?"
The nameless cultivator's eyes twitched in the face of Xiao Hua's fierce expression. When he heard Reverend Xiangtian's challenge, his eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. He raised his hand and a small drumstick that he had put away earlier shined with a yellow light.
"Join in I."
Reverend Yuan Qing finally arrived and said with a smile, Ming Hao's halberd in his hand.
"Humph."
Reverend Xiangtian coldly snorted and said, "Even if it's the three of you, do you think this old man will be afraid of you?" However, although Reverend Xiangtian's voice was fierce, the flying sword in his hand didn't fly out. Xiao Hua coldly smiled and said, "I don't know if you're afraid or not. What I do know is that if you don't cooperate with the three of us, not to mention the treasures on the cliff, even your life will be lost." With that said, Xiao Hua pointed to the left and sternly shouted, "Take a look. The defensive formation is filled with weak winds and glaciers. There are also immortal soldiers and immortal generals hidden inside. Don't tell me you don't know the existence of these immortal generals and how powerful they are. A few golden core cultivators won't be able to fight back in front of them. Even nascent soul cultivators like us won't be able to escape if they surround us." Reverend Xiangtian's words were still unyielding.
"That's what you think.
This old man naturally has his own divine ability. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You're just using the excuse of cooperation to prevent this old man from obtaining the treasures. Xiao Hua ignored Reverend Xianxia and turned to the nameless cultivator. He cupped his hands and said, I am Xiao Hua of Black Cloud Mountain. How should I address you, fellow Taoist? The nameless cultivator smiled and said, I am Su Tingzi of the Jingxi Mountain Villa.
Good.
Xiao Hua nodded and asked, Fellow Taoist Su Tingzi, do you wish to sign with the imperial teacher? The imperial teacher sign? Su Tingzi smiled. I don't need it.
Yes.
Xiao Hua nodded and smiled. I need the imperial teacher sign. Since fellow Taoist needs different things, we should be able to work together.
As you wish.
Su Tingzi was even more delighted. Your wish is my wish.
Reverend Xianxia.
Xiao Hua glanced at Reverend Xianxia. Do you want to oppose the three of us? So what if I oppose you? So what if I don't oppose you? Reverend Xianxia looked around and saw that the weak wind had already started to condense. These strands of weak wind gradually turned into hurricanes. When these weak winds converged into hurricanes, even a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator like him wouldn't be able to deal with them. He had no choice but to find a way out of this situation. I won't talk about the consequences of opposing you, Xiao Hua said indifferently. If you want to work together, then let's put aside our grudges for the time being. As for the strange treasure on the cliff, let's put it aside for the time being. We'll first work together to protect ourselves and use our divine abilities to break this defensive formation.
Haha.
Xiao Hua, are you joking? Reverend Xianxia didn't wait for Xiao Hua to finish speaking and laughed loudly. Break this defensive formation? Do you know what this defensive formation is? How dare you talk about breaking it so arrogantly? Xiao Hua slightly frowned and said indifferently, since it's a formation, it can be broken regardless of whether it's a Taoist formation or a Confucian formation. I don't think there's anything wrong with what I said. Reverend Xianxia coldly snorted. The ignorant are truly fearless. Let this old man tell you, although this old man doesn't know what this imperial formation is, seeing that it can injure both you and me, this imperial formation must be one of the famous 28-star sovereign imperial formations of the Jade Pavilion Conference. In the past, the cultivators who participated in the Jade Pavilion Conference were able to walk out of this defensive formation and obtain the imperial teacher sign. There was no need to go through any selection. I've never heard of the 28-star monarch defensive formations being broken.
Let's hear Reverend Xiao out.
Reverend Yuanqing said coldly. You and I might not be able to break this defensive formation, but it's still possible for us to protect ourselves and obtain the strange treasure inside the defensive formation. That's right. Xiao Hua took advantage of the situation and said, we'll first work together to protect ourselves and then obtain the strange treasure together. If it's the imperial teacher's sign, then I'll thank you three fellow Taoists. If it's not the imperial teacher's sign, then after we escape from the defensive formation, you three will discuss how to divide it. Who's going to take the strange treasure? Reverend Xianxia asked straightforwardly.
Xiao Hua said proudly, naturally it's me.
Why is it you and not me? Reverend Xianxia was immediately dissatisfied.
Because I'm Xiao Hua.
Xiao Hua looked at Reverend Xianxia and said word by word. Reverend Yuanqing clapped his hands.
I agree. What about you?
Fellow Taoist Su Tingzi. Xiao Hua looked at Su Tingzi. Su Tingzi pondered for a moment.
He looked at Reverend Yuanqing and then at his air-frozen bead, which had already begun to waver.
He couldn't help but say tentatively, I'm afraid this air-frozen bead won't be able to last for long.
If Reverend Xiao has the means to protect us while we head to the place where the strange treasure is, then I'll agree for fellow Taoists to take it. Yes, I'll naturally agree to this.
As Xiao Hua spoke, he waved his hand and the weak water bead flew into the air.
As soon as the weak water bead flew out, puffs of weak water fell down and formed a water curtain of varying density that protected the four of them.
The dense weak water blocked the weak wind. Although the weak wind was able to pass through the sparse weak water, Reverend Yuanqing and the others could see through the sparse weak water. The weak wind that passed through the sparse weak water couldn't threaten the safety of the four of them. Good. I'll listen to Reverend Zhao's arrangement. Su Tingzi was overjoyed and hastily put away the air-frozen bead. Reverend Xianxia looked at the weak water bead above Xiao Hua's head and his eyes flickered. The current situation had already been decided. If he didn't agree to Xiao Hua's request, then Xiao Hua would definitely make a move. Reverend Xiangtian had the strength to fight against Reverend Yuanqing and Su Tingzi, but now that Xiao Hua's strength was unfathomable. Reverend Xiangtian pondered for a moment and said indifferently, "Given the current situation, do I still have a choice? Let's go." Seeing that Reverend Xiangtian didn't object, Xiao Hua didn't beat around the bush. He pointed at the weak water bead and flew toward the cliff. Reverend Xiangtian was even faster than Reverend Yuanqing and Su Tingzi. His body swayed and landed on Xiao Hua's left hand. He was within the range of the weak water bead and maintained a sufficient distance from Xiao Hua. Reverend Yuanqing wasn't in a hurry. He raised his hand slightly and signaled Su Tingzi to fly in front while he followed Xiao Hua behind. Chapter 3609. Rumble. Innumerable pillars of weak wind raged within the defensive array, as though they were going to tear the entire space apart. The pillars of wind hit the weak water, causing the water curtain of the weak water to shake violently, and a lot of weak wind rushed into it. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Su Tingzi didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly took out the air-frozen pearl. Under the pale white brilliance, the weak wind weakened by 60%. The weakened weak wind naturally couldn't threaten the 4 nascent soul cultivators. Immortal Yuanqing stole a glance at the weak wind storm outside the brilliance and trembled in his heart. He knew very well that if it weren't for Xiao Hua and Su Tingzi, he would have some means to deal with the weak wind. However, after using these means, his strength would be greatly reduced. Not to mention snatching the rare treasure, he might not even be able to escape from this defensive formation. The most likely outcome was that he would die in the formation of one of the 28 celestial lords. This. Immortal Yuanqing was greatly astonished and muttered to himself, "It seems that the previous Jadestige gathering wasn't like this? Why is this year's Jadestige gathering so strange?" Unfortunately, there were only unexpected things in this world, but there was nothing that others could not achieve. Just as Reverend Yuanqing thought he was lucky, a series of crackling noises that sounded like thunderclaps were heard from the sky above the defensive formation. Streams of icy rivers that were several times stronger than before poured down in torrents. Weak gusts of wind crashed into the icy rivers, and soldiers that were tens of feet tall and even hundreds of feet tall gushed out. These soldiers were either roaring barefooted or riding on horseback while brandishing their spears as they charged toward the 4 men along with the icy rivers. "Watch this old man's technique!" Immortal Xiangtian roared and waved his arms. The flying sword in his left hand turned into a cold plum and rushed out of the air-frozen pearl's brilliance to protect the weak water pearl. The cold plum slightly rotated and the sword rays emitted a glaring brilliance. Immortal Xiangtian's right hand let out a roar from the cauldron. Samadhi true fire flew out from the cauldron and formed a layer of fire shield around the cold plum sword rays. Xiao Hua's weak water droplet could only block the weak wind. It could not block the condensed ice river soldiers. When the valiant soldiers rushed into the weak water droplet, they were immediately killed by the Samadhi true fire. They either turned into the weak wind, or turned into the ice river and fell down. Even if there were some that were not killed by the Samadhi true fire, the cold plum blossom sword light behind it could also kill them. Immortal Xiangtian really lives up to his reputation. Xiao Hua understood and nodded his head inwardly. He also understood that there must be something else in Reverend Xiangtian's Samadhi true fire. Although Xiao Hua didn't mention how the treasures would be distributed after obtaining the Imperial Tutor's lot, it was clear that if one didn't contribute, they wouldn't have the qualifications to obtain the treasures. Once Taoist Xiangtian revealed his 2 treasures, Su Tingzi and Taoist Yuanqing immediately paled in comparison. Taoist Xiangtian couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Of course, Immortal Yuanqing wouldn't agree. He waved his hand and was about to use the halberd when Xiao Hua sneered and said, "Immortal Yuanqing, about 10 feet away from your left hand, attack with all your strength." Immortal Yuanqing was stunned. However, he didn't dare to be careless. He circulated all the magic energy in his body, and the immortal halberd in his hand roared. It turned into a blue dragon and pounced towards the area 10 feet away from him. That was where the weak wind and the ice river had just appeared. Boom! Before the immortal halberd reached the ice river, the space around him was covered by the halberd's aura. Kacha, kacha sounds came from the ice river. When the dragon pounced into the ice river, a blood-curdling scream was heard. A immortal general wearing immortal armor fell out of his chest with a bloody hole. The immortal general's face was filled with disbelief.
Sii.
Immortal Yuan Qing sucked in a breath of cold air, let alone immortal Xianxia and Su Tingzi. This was an immortal general, a Confucian cultivator with 4th grade origin energy. His strength was comparable to an early nascent soul cultivator. Even though he was hiding in the defensive formation, he was still seen through by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's words about breaking the formation were not just empty words.
30 feet above your head.
Xiao Hua shouted again. Immortal Yuan Qing no longer had any doubts. The immortal halberd once again soared into the sky.
Ah!
Another blood-curdling scream was heard. The second immortal general was killed on the spot. Too powerful. Immortal Yuan Qing was full of admiration for Xiao Hua. Su Tingzi 20 feet ahead. Xiao Hua shouted again. Su Tingzi's face lit up with joy. The small drumstick in his hand flew out.
Woo!
A clear sound came from the drumstick. A yellow light condensed into a sharp arrow and disappeared into the void. When it reappeared, it was already 20 feet away from the weak wind. As the three expected, the corpse of a decapitated immortal general appeared again.
Go!
Xiao Hua ordered again. The three hurriedly used their flying techniques and followed Xiao Hua for several hundred feet. Kill! Kill! Following Xiao Hua's orders, close to 10 immortal generals were forced out of the defensive formation. Of course, these 10 immortal generals were not killed. Among them, 4 were only seriously injured. Then, they borrowed the power of the defensive formation to escape. After these 4 immortal generals escaped, the entire defensive formation became a little quieter. No other immortal generals flew out to kill them. Without the immortal generals blocking them, the 4 arrived at the bottom of the cliff in a short while. The light of the strange treasure above their heads could be seen clearly. It was a square jade box.
Let's fly over.
Immortal Yuan Qing, take it. Xiao Hua did not wait for the 3 to say anything. He immediately ordered, "Then I will take care of it."
Okay.
Immortal Yuan Qing did not hesitate. He urged his body to fly up with Xiao Hua. However, as the 4 approached the cliff, Immortal Yuan Qing was about to reach out his hand.
Rumble!
The entire defensive formation let out a loud rumble. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. All the sounds of the flute, the river of ice, and the army were drowned out. In front of Xiao Hua and the others, the entire cliff was shaking. With this shaking, the cliff rapidly retreated. Even the weak wind, the river of ice, and the sound of the flute disappeared in the shaking.
What
is going on? Immortal Yuan Qing was shocked. His hand unconsciously froze. Looking at the jade box within reach, Immortal Yuan Qing involuntarily used his divine ability. A large hand came out of his sleeve and streaked across the sky, chasing after the fleeing cliff. The nascent soul hand can be used. Divine sense can be used as well. Immortal Yuan Qing was overjoyed. After a sweep of his divine sense, he exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, the halberd of Ming Hao flew out and flew toward the cliff in the distance. Yes, divine sense can be used. Immortal Xianxia was also overjoyed. However, he immediately cried out, "Not good, this defensive formation seems to have expanded a lot." Without waiting for him to finish speaking, a slightly hoarse voice called out from the distant horizon,
Where is this?
Io, is this a rare treasure? Let's see who dares to snatch it from this old man." Before the voice fell, a large hand that was several times larger than Immortal Yuan Qing's nascent soul hand streaked across the sky. Following the large hand was a magic treasure that was not inferior to Ming Hao's halberd. It released a powerful aura and fell toward the cliff. A rare treasure? Who dares to snatch it from me? Immediately after, an extremely arrogant voice came from the other side. Another large hand appeared in the sky. Xiao Hua's soul had already swept through the entire defensive formation. Just as Immortal Xianxia had said, the defensive formation had expanded by several times. Within this expanded range, there were more than 20 nascent soul cultivators and hundreds of gold core cultivators. There were far more cultivators than the ones who had fallen into the defensive formation before. There was no need to think too much about it. Xiao Hua already understood that the Star Monarch defense array that these cultivators had fallen into earlier was definitely not the Star Monarch defense array. This Star Monarch defense array must have connected several or even dozens of other defense arrays together. Either it wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop, or it wanted to take advantage of the situation. However, regardless of what the people of Celestial Lord Hall were planning, Xiao Hua's plan had failed. Reverend Xianxia had already taken out 2 more magic treasures and used his nascent soul hand to snatch the jade box from Reverend Yuanqing and the others. Reverend Yuanqing, who was not far away, saw that his divine ability was inferior to the others and called out, "Reverend Xiao, quickly give this poor Taoist a hand."
Xiao Hua frowned. He felt that Immortal Yuanqing's call was a bit abrupt, but he didn't think too much about it.
After all, he was the one who had come up with a plan.
It was normal for Immortal Yuanqing to ask for help if he couldn't get the jade box.
Thus, Xiao Hua clapped his hand and the nascent soul hand immediately rushed out and grabbed towards the cliff. Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand was much larger than the others, and its speed was also much faster. However, just as he was halfway there, the nascent soul hands that rushed out earlier felt that they were not as fast as Xiao Hua. Immediately, there was a rumbling sound as they all flipped their hands at the same time. Several nascent soul hands grabbed at Xiao Hua's large hand. Seeing that Taoist Yuanqing's hand was still in the lead, Xiao Hua understood Taoist Yuanqing's intention. With a flip of his hand expanded once again, tightly grabbing the hands of several nascent soul cultivators.
Gotcha! The entire space trembled.
Xiao Hua's giant hand shook a few times and tore apart the other nascent soul cultivators' giant hands. Only when the several giant hands slowly disappeared did Xiao Hua's giant hand collapse with a loud bang. Everyone turned pale with fright and looked at each other. At this moment, a deafening sound of a flute rang out above everyone's heads. The sound of wind and water appeared again. What made everyone tremble with fear was that a 3-colored giant python fell from the sky with an indescribable majesty along with the sound of the flute. The 3-colored majesty filled the entire defensive formation. Whether it was the cauldron, the flying sword, or the Hongming halberd, they all paled in comparison.
Immortal Xianxia turned pale with fright.
His heart trembled as he whispered, 28th Star Lord.
Chapter 36:10.
Just as Taoist Xianxia let out a low cry, the 3-colored giant python had already landed on Xiao Hua's back. Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand had just collapsed, so he simply didn't have the time to use a divine ability to resist. Boom! The giant python pierced Xiao Hua's back, revealing a bowl-shaped spear.
Poof!
Xiao Hua seemed to have been struck by lightning, and he spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His entire body trembled a few times on the spear before slowly falling down, and his arm powerlessly drooped down.
Taoist Xiao. Taoist Yuanqing raised his eyebrows.
The appearance of this long spear was really unexpected. Seeing that Xiao Hua was seriously injured, Taoist Yuanqing seemed to have thought of something. He cried out in alarm and stopped. That huge hand that was rushing towards the sky, and the halberd that was following closely behind also restrained its brilliance and carefully stopped in mid-air. The spear that had injured Xiao Hua paused for a moment beside Xiao Hua, as if it was hesitating. Then, it turned back into a python and flew back into the sky. The pressure that caused all the nascent soul cultivators to tremble disappeared without a trace.
Humph!
Taoist Xianxia let out a cold snort and the giant hand that had stopped moved once again. While the nascent soul cultivators were hesitating, it immediately rushed forward. Taoist Xianxia turned into a rainbow and the cold plum blossom flying sword let out a thunderous roar as it protected him. It was as if he wasn't afraid of being killed by the celestial monarch.
Xiao Hua.
Taoist Yuanqing stood in the air and scanned Xiao Hua's body with his divine sense. He frowned as if he was hesitating, but only for a moment.
Taoist Yuanqing also turned into a rainbow and the halberd shined brightly.
With a thunderous roar, a ferocious dragon shape appeared once again. However, this dragon shape didn't chase after Taoist Yuanqing. Instead, it waited in the air until Taoist Yuanqing flew past it before charging into Taoist Yuanqing's golden light shield. Su Tingzi was originally in a daze, but when he saw Taoist Yuanqing also abandon Xiao Hua, he immediately understood. The reason the celestial official in charge of the defensive formation killed Xiao Hua was not because Xiao Hua wanted to snatch the rare treasure. The rare treasure of the defensive formation was something that should be snatched. Instead, it was because Xiao Hua and the other three had killed the immortal general controlling the formation. Or perhaps it could be said that because of Xiao Hua's existence, the four people who should have been fighting fiercely did not fight to the death. Instead, they formed a rope.
Although they did not have the strength to break through the defensive formation, they still made the star venerates guarding the formation feel afraid, which was why they attacked.
Sigh. Su Tingzi looked at where Xiao Hua had landed and wanted to help. However, he didn't dare to offend the star monarch controlling the array. After all, the star monarch guarding the array was a 5th-stage origin Qi realm cultivator. He was far from being a match for him. However, Su Tingzi sighed. He knew that he no longer had the advantage of being the first to enter the array. At this moment, even the other nascent soul cultivators who had just entered the array were stronger than him, let alone Sage Xianxia. He could only look for other opportunities. As a result, Su Tingzi decided not to snatch the treasure. Instead, he released his divine sense and carefully observed the movements of the defensive formation. He wanted to find an opportunity to escape from the defensive formation. Moreover, Su Tingzi was selfish.
He wasn't too far away from where Xiao Hua had landed.
When the defensive formation was in chaos, he wanted to see if he could bring the heavily injured Xiao Hua along with him. Of course, this was only a trace of kindness. Su Tingzi didn't know if the star monarch controlling the formation would let Xiao Hua go. Taoist Yuan Qing and Sage Xiangtian moved. Whether it was their nascent soul cultivators or their escape techniques, they immediately alerted the other nascent soul cultivators. In the beginning, the other cultivators were naturally puzzled.
They thought that the two of them were not afraid of death and dared to oppose the star monarch guarding the formation. However, when they saw that the two of them were getting closer and closer to the treasure and that murderous tricolored python spear had yet to appear, how could they still hold themselves back?
Damn it! A nascent soul mid-stage cultivator angrily cursed.
He opened his mouth and a magic treasure that looked like a string of beads rushed into the air.
Then, the entire string of beads exploded. As the cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood essence on it, the beads transformed into sinister skulls.
They let out soul-stirring screeches in the air and rushed towards the treasure as fast as lightning.
Another cultivator slapped his forehead.
A very delicate crane emerged from the top of his head. It let out a soft cry in the air and flapped its wings before falling into the void.
When it reappeared, it was already 300 meters away. There were even several nascent soul cultivators who let out loud roars. Magic power surged around their bodies and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth madly poured into them. They either flickered with golden light or faintly glowed with green light. There was even one who had a demonic body. Feeling that they could not stop others from obtaining the treasure, the cultivators prepared to intercept Sage Xiangtian or Taoist Yuan Qing from all directions. However, the cultivator who had a demonic body was a strange winged demonic body. When he spread his wings, his flight was equally astonishing.
He joined the ranks of the cultivators who fought for the treasure.
The nascent soul cultivators within the defensive formation each used their own methods to fight for the treasure. How could the 100 or so golden core cultivators who were swept into the defensive formation dare to approach? They did not even have the intention to take advantage of the situation like Su Tingzi. They only trembled as they descended. They were prepared to find some spiritual herbs and other items within the defensive formation. Otherwise, they would wait in a safe place and escape when a flaw appeared in the defensive formation. The nascent soul cultivator with the demonic body seemed to be the fastest.
In just a few breaths, he had already caught up to the hand of a nascent soul cultivator.
How could the hand let him go? The hand whistled and grabbed at the air, wanting to stop the cultivator. Kaka! The nascent soul cultivator let out a long laugh. He did not use any other abilities. Instead, he flapped his wings and charged toward the hand. Rumble! A loud sound echoed through the defensive formation once more. A large hole was created in the hand of the nascent soul cultivator. The nascent soul cultivator's demonic body staggered and was about to fly back into the sky. However, at that moment, a ray of light appeared. It was an unknown nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure that blocked the path of the nascent soul cultivator. Pa! Just as the ray of light appeared, it immediately turned into a 5-colored screen and covered the nascent soul cultivator before the nascent soul cultivator could see it clearly. Not only that, but right after the loud noise, the entire defensive formation shook again. The life-threatening sound of the pipa rang out, and the Ice River iron horses broke free from their reins.
This formation was even stranger than the one Xiao Hua and the others had encountered before.
After the sound of the pipa, the sound of the whistle also rang out.
The weak wind and the dense fog coexisted, and there was a sense of harmony between the zither and the zither.
Kill!
Battle cries rang out from the omnipresent cavalry.
The already chaotic defensive formation became even more chaotic as battle cries shook the heavens.
Damn it! Seeing that his head was blocked by the five-colored light and that there was a dazzling light coming toward him, the nascent soul cultivator was furious.
Blue light appeared around his body like a wave and a dragon horn gradually appeared on his forehead. The moment the horn appeared, his aura increased and his wings expanded even more. He flapped his wings and his demonic body charged toward the light like a meteor. He wanted to break this magic treasure just like he had broken through the nascent soul cultivator's hand.
However, he didn't notice that a weak wind was quietly blowing above his head.
Puff! The nascent soul crashed into the countless screens of light. The screens of light closed up like a peacock folding its wings.
However, in front of the screens of light, a ray of blue light shot out like a sharp thorn.
Boom! The space several dozen feet around him shook.
The magic treasure was actually shattered by the nascent soul cultivator's nascent soul cultivator.
Puff!
In the distance, a short nascent soul cultivator's expression changed and he spat out a mouthful of blood.
It was clear that his life source magic treasure had been destroyed and he had suffered a lot of damage. However, before he could take out a healing pill from his Jianghu bag, he heard a burst of ear-piercing pipa music below him. A dozen ice spears suddenly pierced toward him, scaring the cultivator into hastily forming hand seals. A light as large as a mountain smashed down and blocked the ice spears. Whoosh! Immediately after, a weak wind blew and a sizzling sound could be heard. The short cultivator's already somewhat dim protective light was blown out even more. Not good. The short cultivator grew alert and hastily slapped his forehead. A 5-meter-tall nascent soul appeared with a broken fan in its hand.
However, there was a trace of golden blood at the corner of the nascent soul's mouth and its face was dispirited.
Shwa! The moment the nascent soul appeared, it immediately rubbed its hands and the fan fell. The 5-colored light was about to cover the cultivator's body once more.
Unfortunately, just as the 5-colored brilliance swept past the cultivator's neck, an iron spear emerged from the wind and mysteriously pierced the cultivator's back.
Ayo! The small nascent soul let out a roar. It was clearly extremely angry. It reached out and a blood-red restriction smashed down like thunder. Boom! After a loud bang, the iron spear broke in half and was thrown into the air. A mouthful of blood came out of the wind, but when the wind blew by, everything disappeared. Damn it! The nascent soul helplessly looked at its lifeless body and the large hole in its back.
It let out a sharp curse. Then light surged around its body and it was about to fly away.
Just at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Woo! A dense fog appeared. It was several times more dense than anywhere else. Along with this dense fog, an aura that could even suffocate a grade 5 origin energy cultivator came out from the nascent soul's body.
A pillar of boundless chi that was even more solid than the nascent soul's hand covered the nascent soul.
GG! The nascent soul was shocked. As it screamed, it spat out several mouthfuls of blood, which turned into extremely bright symbols. The symbols disappeared into the nascent soul's body. The nascent soul's body disappeared in the blink of an eye. This nascent soul wanted to use teleportation to escape from the boundless chi pillar. Boom! The boundless chi pillar rumbled as it rushed into the void, causing the surrounding space to distort intensely. That nascent soul no longer made any sound.
Furthermore, the rumbling sound of the boundless chi pillar was not that loud compared to the neighs of the glacier war horses.
The group of cultivators who were focused on the treasures on the cliff did not notice the disappearance of a nascent soul. Chapter 36:11. Since the nascent soul stage adepts who had sneak attacked others ended up in such a miserable state, the nascent soul stage adepts who had been sneak attacked did not fare any better. The Dharma stage adept with a demon body had just rushed out of the magic treasure with his powerful demon body. The green light around him flashed rapidly, as if his Dharma power was not enough to support his Dharma form. At this moment, The ice river suddenly flowed, and a group of armored horses stepped on the ice and surrounded him in an instant. Although the sound of cracking could be heard at the beginning, when the wind blew and the fog arrived, the nascent soul stage adept with a demon body did not appear again. Which of the dozens of nascent soul stage adepts was not arrogant? Which of them would be willing to submit to others? Which of them would care about the ice river and armored horses created by the defense array? Even if they found out that someone was injured or killed, they would only feel happy. They would only feel that there was one less person competing with them. Who would think more about it? On the contrary, the golden elixir stage adepts began to gather together and form a certain formation to resist the defense array together. Of course, their strength was insignificant in this battle between the 28 Star Lords. In a short time, dozens of adepts had fallen. Fortunately, they were not the main targets of the Star Lord Palace, so there were no immortal generals around them. Sigh. Since ancient times, the onlookers had a clearer view of the situation.
Su Tingzi did not feel much when he was fighting for the rare treasure, but now that he was standing at the side and saw how fierce the defense array was, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air.
If this Yao Tai meeting is so dangerous, even if it's for the Imperial Preceptor's lot, even if it's for the rare treasure, who would still participate? Could it be that Kong Hongwu is stupid? In just half a day, several nascent soul stage adepts and dozens of golden elixir stage adepts have fallen in this defense array. What about the other defense arrays?
Moreover, there are immortal soldiers and immortal generals hiding in the fog and in the weak water.
It is far from what the rumors said before that the defense array was only created by the defense array. Could it be that this Yao Tai meeting is different from the previous ones? In the past, no matter how few the Imperial Preceptor's lots were, there were at least dozens or even 50. How could there only be 10? No matter how rare the rare treasures in the past were, it seemed that they could not be compared to this one. Previously, when this old man heard about the rare treasure, I was already blinded by greed. Now that I think about it, isn't this a dead end? Su Tingzi immediately broke out in a cold sweat when he thought of the death trap. Since it was a death trap, how could there be any survivors? Since it was a dead end, how could he allow anyone to speak of this matter?
In an instant, Su Tingzi understood why the Star Lord Hall had given out the lot of 10 Imperial advisors and why they had taken out 3 rare treasures.
Perhaps there were survivors, and there were 13 of them. Perhaps more, but definitely not too much. The Confucian cultivator's methods are truly too ruthless. Su Tingzi didn't know why the Confucian cultivator was so ruthless, but he knew that this trip wasn't a good one. What should we do? Su Tingzi's gaze was fixed on the Imperial array. Cries of murder filled the entire Imperial array. Reverend Xianxia and Reverend Yuanqing's figures had already disappeared. The Dharma treasures on the cliff shone with boundless brilliance, and the pillars of Aor and Qi soared into the sky. However, the dense fog and weak water blocked all of this. Su Tingzi could only see the golden core cultivators fleeing in panic like ants. Perhaps I'll have a chance to survive if I mix in with the golden core cultivators. However, if I do that, how am I supposed to live in the future? How am I supposed to survive in the Dao sect? What a pity. If only Xiao Hua was here. That's right, Xiao Hua. That Taoist Xiao seemed to have been injured by the Star Lord guarding the array, but he didn't die like the other nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, that python spear hesitated for a moment, as if it was confirming Xiao Hua's death.
Damn it, I'll go all out.
Thinking of Xiao Hua's abilities, Su Tingzi couldn't help but feel excited. Xiao Hua was still alive even after being killed by a Star Lord at the 5th stage of origin energy. This level of strength was far beyond his reach. If he could save Xiao Hua, not only would he be indebted to him, he could even borrow Xiao Hua's strength to escape from the Imperial array. Su Tingzi weighed the pros and cons. He looked at the sky, then looked at the fierce battle in the distance. After destroying a few glaciers, he quietly landed at the place where Xiao Hua had landed. Su Tingzi looked into the distance and also thought about the sky. However, he forgot that he was also a nascent soul cultivator. Some golden core cultivators not too far away from him were also thinking about him. Seeing Su Tingzi quietly land, about 20 golden core cultivators exchanged glances and also followed him to the bottom of the Imperial array from a distance. The golden core cultivators thought very well, but when they got close to Su Tingzi, they were dumbfounded. They thought that Su Tingzi had found a flaw in the defensive formation, But when they saw Su Tingzi, they only saw him carrying the unconscious Xiao Hua with one hand with a strange expression on his face.
You.
Su Tingzi was even more dumbfounded than these golden core cultivators. However, he didn't have time to think too much. Several weak winds and glaciers appeared between him and the golden core cultivators. Even if the golden core cultivators fought bravely, 2 of them still died on the spot before Su Tingzi could make a move. We juniors are trapped in this imperial array and don't have the ability to escape. We only hope that senior can help us. Once we leave the imperial array, we will definitely follow you through life and death. We will serve senior or senior's country. Seeing that Su Tingzi had made a move, the 2 late golden core cultivators at the front were overjoyed and hastily spoke.
Don't.
Su Tingzi raised his hand and quickly waved it, but before he could say anything, his expression froze. Then, his eyes darted around a few times, and he changed the topic. There was some bitterness and some difficulty in his voice as he said, "Forget it. Since we are fated to meet, why not help you this time?" How could the golden core cultivators notice that Su Tingzi's tone was strange? All of them were about to bow, but just as they were about to do so, Su Tingzi spoke again. "However, even I am powerless within the defense formation. I still have to split my energy to take care of all of you. Swear a blood oath right now, or I won't agree." Su Tingzi's words were very honest. No one would risk their lives for a cultivator they didn't know. The golden core cultivators' words from before were indeed a bit careless, so the 2 golden core cultivators at the front didn't hesitate to make the oath. Sure enough, among the 20 or so cultivators, there were still 4 golden core cultivators who weren't sincere. They didn't wait to make the blood oath before activating their magic treasures and rushing elsewhere. They must be looking for their own opportunities inside the imperial array. Su Tingzi looked at the backs of these cultivators and coldly smiled. He waved his hand and said, "Activate your magic treasures and form an ordinary formation behind me." Although the golden core cultivator at the front had said his name when he made the oath, how could Su Tingzi remember it at this critical moment? He pointed with his finger and said, You, the 3 of you stand in front of the other people's heads. The rest of you find 3 people to stand behind them." "Yes." The golden core disciple at the front hurriedly agreed. He turned around and called out a few names. They lined up according to Su Tingzi's instructions. At this moment, a weak wind blew, and the ice river appeared. Su Tingzi led the nearly 20 golden core cultivators into the wind and rain of the formation. With a nascent soul cultivator like Su Tingzi taking care of them, the 20 golden core cultivators only paid the price of 2 golden core cultivators being injured. Su Tingzi's magic treasure was shaped like a drumstick. When he activated it with all his strength, it produced a yellow glow around it. It was called the heaven-shaking hammer. In the time it took to finish a cup of tea, it was able to kill a few dozen golden core cultivators and even a dozen immortal soldiers. However, the more he killed, the paler Su Tingzi's face became. There was even extreme fear in his eyes. Occasionally, he would look at the sky as if he was afraid of attracting the attention of the star monarch guarding the imperial array. When he looked at the cliff, there was even more fog and light. He didn't know how many nascent soul cultivators were still alive, and he didn't know who had obtained the treasure inside the jade box. Seeing that the wind was getting weaker, both the sound of the pipa and the whistle were getting weaker, Su Tingzi's eyes were filled with joy. He waved his hand and whispered, "Quick, follow me and increase our speed. There should be a result over there." This imperial array. Unfortunately, before Su Tingzi could finish speaking, he heard a loud whistle and a 3-colored python descended from above his head. At the same time, an unparalleled aura came crashing down like a huge mountain.
"Save me!"
Su Tingzi was shocked and let out a heart-wrenching scream. It was as if he had long been afraid of this aura. As Su Tingzi circulated his spiritual energy, the golden light around him shined brightly. The heaven-shaking hammer turned into a giant hammer and charged at the 3-colored python. As for Xiao Hua, who was still in his hand, he casually tossed him to the side. Boom! The heaven-shaking hammer flew into the air, but before it could even touch the python's spear, it was sent flying. However, the strange thing was that Su Tingzi didn't seem to have any intention of fighting the python's spear head-on. Although the heaven-shaking hammer was sent flying and Su Tingzi's face was pale, his body continued to fly backward.
Roar!
The python's spear was like a dragon. It let out an angry roar and stabbed towards Su Tingzi's heart even faster than Su Tingzi's retreat. Under the three-colored light, Su Tingzi's face was ashen. He stared at where the python spear came from as if he wanted to see the Star Lord's face clearly. Whoosh! When the python spear was less than 6 feet away from Su Tingzi, a ray of golden light shot out from the side of the python spear. The golden light shot into the air and a thunderous sound echoed. Then, a miserable scream rang out and the python spear stopped in midair. Xiao Hua, who had been thrown into the air by Su Tingzi, suddenly jumped up. He reached out and used the universe in the sleeve on a three-colored python spear. Although the python spear had returned to its original form, it seemed to have a life of its own as it trembled violently. Wails came from the body of the spear, and strands of righteous spirit rushed out like an aura. Even when Xiao Hua's magic power reached out, the Taoist robe fell on the body of the spear, and a thick pillar of Aoran Qi roared with a powerful roar, smashing onto Xiao Hua's universe in the sleeve, wanting to work together with the python spear to destroy Xiao Hua's magic. Chapter 36:12. Unfortunately, no matter how much the python spear struggled, even if the weak wind, thick fog and icy river above Xiao Hua's head disappeared, revealing a clear sky, the python spear still sadly fell into Xiao Hua's hands and instantly disappeared. Only then did another drop of blood fall from the sky. All the golden core cultivators prostrated themselves before this aura. While they trembled with fear, they didn't have any thoughts of fighting back at all. However, they were extremely shocked as well. After seeing Su Tingzi's situation, how could they not know that everything had been set up by Xiao Hua? Even them following Su Tingzi was a move by Xiao Hua to lure the star monarch guarding the formation? The few sharp-eyed cultivators who were the first to fall into this defensive formation saw the might of the tricolored python spear when it killed Xiao Hua. Then they saw that Xiao Hua was still alive and kicking, as if he was not injured at all. The hope in their hearts rose again. Humph! A sound that shook the space hundreds of feet in radius fell from the clear sky above everyone's heads. Countless pillars of noble qi descended once again, and everyone's vision darkened. A golden-armored celestial general that was hundreds of feet tall blocked the light that shone into the defensive formation. At the same time, a huge amount of noble qi rushed into the celestial general's left hand, and a huge golden hand slowly appeared in mid-air. Looking at the celestial general's appearance again, wasn't it one of the 28 star monarchs that had appeared in front of the Yaotai mountain? The aura of this star monarch was like his huge body. Wisps of golden fog flowed out from his golden armor, and condensed into huge inscriptions on the armor. Each inscription gave off a powerful aura that was not inferior to the aura of a golden core cultivator. The aura of the inscriptions on the armor gathered together as if it was real, blocking everyone's mouths and noses. The fear of not being able to face an enemy involuntarily rose from the bottom of the hearts of the golden core cultivators. Even Su Tingzi, who had escaped death and looked lucky, could not help but release his aura to resist with all his might. Woo 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 woo. Just as the crowd was in fear, a similarly powerful pillar of qi appeared opposite the celestial lord. With a roar, it rushed into a gradually expanding golden body. Waves of golden light emerged from the golden body like the rising sun, and a similarly rising pressure overflowed from the golden body. Wasn't this Xiao Hua's Transcendence golden body? Xiao Hua's Transcendence golden body appeared and immediately fought against the Star Lord's golden body. A series of violent crackling sounds were produced in the void between the two. In the midst of this explosive sound, the group of Jindan cultivators was blown far away. They actually didn't even have the ability to get close to it. Su Tingzi's eyes turned. Seeing that Rua Feng, Bing He, and the others near Xiao Hua's golden body had disappeared, he hastily flew towards the golden core cultivators, quietly preparing to sneak out with these golden core cultivators. You are very powerful. That star monarch watched Xiao Hua's golden body form and indifferently said. That voice was like a yellow bell that shook the surroundings loudly. However, once you enter Yaotai Mountain, you will not have the opportunity to leave. This old man is Star Monarch Hall's Star Monarch Jianghu Xuan. If you become a star general under this old man's tutelage, this old man will not only guarantee your survival, but will also allow you to obtain everything you want. Whatever you need in your cultivation, whether it is cultivation methods or medicinal pills, this old man can give them all to you. Star Monarch Jianghu Xuan. Xiao Hua's eyes slightly narrowed. He sneered and said, You dare use the name of the 28 lunar mansions.
You truly are arrogant. If this old man were to become your subordinate, wouldn't this old man's illustrious name be sullied? Since ancient times, Confucianism and Taoism have been different. Since this old man has chosen Taoism, he will not wallow in the mire with Confucianism cultivators like you. Ha ha! You insignificant Taoism cultivator is the arrogant one.
Even if you have touched the threshold of essence energy 5th rank, even if you have a scheme to make this old man fall into your trap, how could you know that this old man was probing you? However, this old man was somewhat careless, not expecting your magic weapon to be this powerful. A moment of carelessness and I fell into your trap, that's all.
Jianghu Xuan laughed heartily.
Pointing his finger at the soaring dragon shears flying above Xiaohua's head, he said, "This old man likes that you have some abilities, and this old man just happens to have a vacancy for a star general. This is why this old man said these few words to you.
Otherwise, this old man could kill you right now."
Noisy.
This old man has never seen such an arrogant absorption like yours. Don't you think you'll cut your tongue if you talk big?
Xiaohua was unmoved. This old man has only used 30% of his abilities, and you are not my opponent.
If I use all of my abilities, would you not die on the spot?
Forget it.
Jianghu Xuan seemed to have lost his patience.
Clenching his hand, a thick and vast pillar of qi condensed into an enormous spear in his hand. This old man knows your intentions.
It's a pity that even if you stall for time, those little things cannot possibly break out of the star array.
Even you are about to fall into the star array.
Woo!
Jianghu Xuan opened his mouth, and a mouthful of tricolored true qi rushed into the air like a waterfall.
Rumble! The earth quaked and the mountains swayed, and the entire mountain ridge swayed.
Immediately, that mountain ridge rumbled, and 2 enormous dragon figures slowly emerged. And at the cliff between the 2 mountain ridges, a cloud several hundred zhong in size appeared. A portion of the tricolored true qi fell into it, immediately drawing the vast amount of vast qi from the void to pour in. That cloud transformed into a tricolored ball of light that fell into the imperial array. The 2 dragon figures also roared as they rushed towards this ball of light.
2 dragons playing with a pearl?
Xiaohua somewhat understood, and his calm face became gloomy again. This was because, with his tyrannical divine sense, he had already understood that the 2 dragon figures really surrounded the entire star array in the center. When the dragon figures were hovering around the pearl, it had already driven the entire imperial array. The airflow inside the imperial array was like a knife. The nascent soul cultivators who were previously fighting stopped in horror, trying their best to resist this innate power. As for the nearly 50 gold core cultivators who were lucky enough to survive, they were like dandelions in the wind. They could only roll around, unable to resist.
Jianghu Xuan did not need to do anything at all.
As long as he controlled the huge ball of light to trigger the dragon figures playing with the pearl, all the cultivators would be killed.
Eat this old man's staff.
Xiaohua smiled coldly and calmed his heart.
He raised the wishful staff with both hands. The staff turned into hundreds of feet in size and smashed towards Jianghu Xuan. The staff crossed the sky, and cracks appeared in the void. The whistling sound of the wind rushed into the cracks, and no one could hear it. Jianghu Bao's face was full of contempt, but he didn't dare to be careless.
The long spear in his hand also didn't dare to be careless.
Woo!
It let out a strange sound, and also went to meet Xiaohua. Not only that, when the long spear swayed, a pillar of great spirit as heavy as a mountain, and a great spirit as sharp as a flying sword also appeared around Xiaohua, rushing toward his golden body.
Boom! Bang!
The pillar of noble qi hit Xiaohua's body, and a dark golden crack appeared and a black liquid seeped out of the crack.
Jianghu Xuan's strength of the 5th level was not just for show.
The power of this blow alone could kill a nascent soul cultivator. However, when the noble qi fell on Xiaohua's golden body, Xiaohua's wishful staff also smashed on Jianghu Xuan's long spear. With a loud bang, not only was the long spear smashed, but Jianghu Xuan's arm was also hit by the wishful staff. The newly regenerated left arm was now splashed with blood and flesh.
See!
Jianghu Xuan sucked in a breath of cold air in pain and hurriedly urged his genuine qi. However, seeing the birth of 3-colored genuine qi, his injured arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, one injury after another made Jianghu Xuan's face even paler.
I have to say, this old man has underestimated you,
Jianghu Bao said solemnly. He did not dare to neglect and hurriedly took out a huge strange weapon from his Chengkuan bag. The weapon looked like a long spear, but there was a big hand in front of his head. The hand was holding a thick dagger. Kill. Xiao Hua already had the intention to kill. Without waiting for Jingmu Xuan to take the weapon, the wishful staff in his hand stirred up the wind and clouds and struck again. Jingmu Xuan was also a good martial artist. He waved his huge weapon and urged the abundant noble qi in the defensive array to fight with Xiao Hua. These two huge golden bodies fought in a chaotic battle. In just half a cup of tea's time, the entire defensive array was disturbed by the two. Even the two dragon forms were not as powerful as the two. However, Xiao Hua was not as calm as Jingmu Xuan. He wanted to protect himself and save Su Tingzi and the others, so he must kill Jingmu Xuan. Jingmu Xuan was an immortal general of the 5th level. It was easy to defeat him, but how difficult was it to kill him? Also, Jingmu Xuan could borrow the power of the defensive array, so the possibility of Xiao Hua killing him was really small. In particular, Jingmu Xuan was still fighting with Xiao Hua with ease and did not borrow the power of the defensive array. Xiao Hua waved his staff and knocked Jingmu Xuan down half a foot. He squinted at Jingmu Xuan's golden body and then looked at the two dragon forms in the distance. Unconsciously, he had a plan in mind. At this time, Xiao Hua did not have his own spiritual treasure that could kill Jingmu Xuan in one blow, but he would not test it one by one like before. However, Jingmu Bao roared angrily, and a 3-colored auspicious cloud appeared under his feet. He waved his strange weapon again, and the Howren Chi swords that could flatten a mountain peak stabbed toward Xiao Hua. A huge roar also came from the hand in front of the weapon. Although Xiao Hua's golden body was cut down and collapsed piece by piece, his face was still as calm as water. The invisible nascent soul controlled by the green-robed Xiao Hua quietly appeared above his head. The Tang Jiao shears, which was flashing with golden light in mid-air, turned into a huge dragon again and rushed toward Jingmu Xuan. That huge dragon swung its tail at Jingmu Xuan's back. You have some skills. Seeing Xiao Hua multitasking, using his divine thoughts to activate the Tang Jiao shears while fighting him, Jingmu Xuan was slightly surprised. Just as this faint surprise appeared, he saw a small gourd appear above Xiao Hua's head. In the blink of an eye, something with a nose and eyes emerged from the mouth of the gourd. Jingmu Xuan's mind was in a trance. Oh, not good. Jingmu Xuan turned pale with fright and hurriedly patted his head. A 3-colored genuine qi rushed into the sky and instantly turned into a majestic Z. Chapter 36:13. This Z was different from Xiao Hua's previous Z. It was dressed like a general, and even the appearance of this Z was somewhat similar to Jingmu Bai. 3 Qi's unification. Refine the spirit back to the void. As soon as Xiao Hua saw Jingmu Bao's tricolored true qi and Z, he immediately understood. Jingmu Bao had not only cultivated the 3 qis unifying the origin, but he had also refined his mind into the Z, reaching the stage of refining the mind back to the void. Moreover, when this Z appeared, Jingmu Bai's absent-minded eyes immediately became clear. Even when the 2 green and red spirit execution yuan light fell on the top of this Z's head, they were stopped by the 3-colored true qi and could not fall at all. Even so, Jingmu Bao, who was lucky enough to escape, was sweating profusely on his back. He was still in a state of shock. As soon as he felt this, a sharp pain came from his back. The soaring dragon shears had taken advantage of his resistance to the spirit-slaying yuan light to cut off a large piece of his back. Damn it! Jingmu Bai gritted his teeth. The 3-colored Z above his head waved its hand, and countless inscriptions fell from its hand. Jingmu Bai was a military Confucian cultivator. His Z was not only dressed like a general, but also could control the inscriptions with a raise of its hand. It was somewhat similar to the Confucian cultivators of Confucianism. Cha-cha-cha. As the inscriptions in the hands of the Z smashed down, thunderbolts appeared from the clear sky around Xiao Hua, flocking into Xiao Hua's golden body. Boom! The thunderbolts of the Z were really powerful. Not only could it blow down the entire mountain range, but Xiao Hua's golden body also collapsed along with it. However, the thing that made Jingmu Xue raise her eyebrows happened again. She saw a green light flash between Xiao Hua's eyebrows, and one by one, the green seal characters that were even colder than the inscriptions appeared. Then, a spell that sounded like the whispers of the gods resounded in the air. Rumble! Layers of dense lightning appeared and fell on his golden body. Incomparable numbness came out, and the golden body collapsed in an instant. Moreover, the collapse spread rapidly, and there was no way to stop it. What kind of method is this? Has this Yaotai mountain already locked the Dao Sect's thunder drawing technique? How can this cultivator use it? Moreover, how could this lightning have anything to do with the strange characters? Jingmu Bao was completely dumbfounded. Admittedly, Jingmu Bao was stunned by Xiao Hua's means, but his nightmare had just begun. Because under the dark green lightning, he did not know when a layer of two-colored fire net had sprouted from the bottom of his feet, rolling up from bottom to top. As soon as his golden body touched this fire net, it immediately turned into pure liquid and fell into the air. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Jingmu Bao roared in succession. It was unknown whether he was scolding Xiao Hua, regretting that he had carelessly lost his weapon, or scolding himself for not even preparing too many imperial weapons and scrolls. While Jingmu Bao was cursing, the tricolored Z above his head suddenly flew up. His right hand clenched into a fist, and like a meteor piercing through the sun, he smashed towards Xiao Hua's head with an irresistible imprisoning force. Hee hee! Xiao Hua sneered. The green-robed Xiao Hua controlled his invisible nascent soul to immediately fly out from the top of Xiao Hua's head. His two hands hugged the air, and streaks of lightning slowly emerged, preparing to launch a sneak attack halfway. However, just as Xiao Hua's nascent soul flew out, it immediately gave birth to a kind of indescribable warning sign. A vague huge suction force came from the depths of the defensive formation. Although it had not yet come out, it had already locked onto Xiao Hua's nascent soul. The green-robed Xiao Hua shuddered. He did not have time to sneak attack Jingmu Bao, and immediately urged his nascent soul to land on top of Xiao Hua's head. When this nascent soul touched Xiao Hua's body, the warning sign immediately disappeared, and the suction force also disappeared. Damn it! What's going on? Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. It was also because of this absent-mindedness that Xiao Hua immediately lost the opportunity. The Z's fist fell down. Xiao Hua looked at the head that he dodged, but it was precisely his left shoulder that collapsed. Rumble! With a series of muffled sounds, Xiao Hua's several hundred zhong golden body could no longer support, and slowly shrunk. Jingmu Bao was also not that strong. When the Z just hit Xiao Hua's golden body, Jingmu Bao felt his mind become confused again, and the soul-punishing Yuan light once again had a tendency to fall. He hastily withdrew the Z, and then looked at Xiao Hua, who hastily withdrew his golden body, and a trace of a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then that Z waved his hand, and a huge ball of light fell in front of him. Those two dragon-shaped figures dragged their long dragon bodies and pounced over. Jingmu Bao lowered his head and looked at the fire net that he couldn't extinguish even with his noble qi. He knew that if he didn't kill Xiao Hua, he wouldn't be able to escape. But he saw Jingmu Bao grin. The Z above his head waved his hands, and the huge ball of light immediately divided into three under the noble qi that was sharper than the edge of a blade. Among these three balls of light, the one in the Z's hand was bigger, and the other two were smaller. Go! A majestic voice that could shake the entire defensive formation burst out from the Z's mouth. It was more ear-piercing than spring thunder. Two vast noble qi pillars emitted a huge rumbling sound as they penetrated the heaven and earth, and directly rushed into the two small balls of light. At the same time, the Z opened his mouth again, and three-colored Zhen Qi spurted out like a rainbow bridge, which divided into two and fell on top of the balls of light. Roar! The two dragon figures raised their huge heads. Although the dragon heads were blurry, they revealed an indescribable excitement. When the dragon heads opened, a cold and dark aura was emitted from the holes in the dragon heads. The two balls of light that were filled with Jingmu Bao's condensed Zhen Qi fell into the dragon heads. Pa 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 pa. The originally blurry dragon heads, after the three-colored Zhen Qi fell into their mouths, clearly had some color, like the finishing touch, and this color quickly spread over the dragon body. Roar! The earth shook, and the ice river and the weak wind formation were now crazily surging. Along with the swaying of the two dragon figures, an imposing aura that could suppress everything, along with the entire defensive formation, rushed towards Xianxia. Jingmu Bao smiled, and his smile was very bright. Although the fire net under his feet had not been extinguished, and although the spirit-slaying light above the head of the Z was still threatening his life, he was not the slightest bit afraid. The momentum of the two dragons playing with a pearl was the final killing move of the defensive formation. While Xianxia was scheming against him, he was also scheming against Xianxia. Jingmu Bao had never seen a Taoist cultivator who could escape from the defensive formation of the two dragons playing with a pearl. In the previous Jade Pavilion gathering, the defensive formation of the two dragons playing with a pearl was enough to catch all the Taoist cultivators in one fell swoop. Who knows what the palace master is thinking? Today, he actually opened the 28 star arrays? The strength of this Taoist cultivator is far beyond the 4th level of Yuanli. It would be a pity to kill him. It's better to suppress him and use him for me. Jingmu Bao secretly calculated. Unfortunately, there was always an accident. Just as Jingmu Bao smiled, he saw a disc spit out from Xiaohua's mouth. As soon as the disc came out, it suddenly expanded. Layers of golden dragon qi gushed out from the disc, and within this dragon qi, countless images of mountains and rivers emerged. Jingmu Bao was stunned. His heart gave birth to a kind of unimaginable feeling. He watched as the whole disc instantly turned into an oval-shaped imperial jade seal in the midst of the dragon qi. A terrifying aura rushed out of the imperial jade seal, causing immortals and mortals to retreat. It rushed towards Xiaohua's two dragon forms and pressed down. Suppress! Xiaohua coldly roared. Although his voice was much less dignified than the previous Z, it was still exceptionally clear and incomparably powerful. Following this voice, the two dragon figures trembled violently. The dragon qi of the mountain and river seal descended like a large hand. Regardless of whether it was the dragon head or the dragon pearl, it grabbed them all in one go. How can you have the national weapon? How can you control the national weapon? How can you control the fate of a country? Jingmu Bao shouted in disbelief, and then his Z also trembled like a sieve under the suppression of the dragon qi. A sense of crisis that he had never felt before arose in his heart. Logically speaking, although the mountain and river seal was powerful, it might not be able to suppress him, a Star Lord of Star Lord Palace. However, in order to control the imperial formation of the two dragons playing with the pearl, he had fused his genuine qi with the dragon pearls. This way, although it was easy to control the imperial formation, when Xiaohua suppressed the dragon pearls and dragon figures, his Z was also suppressed. What scared Jingmu Bao the most was that the dragon qi above the mountain and river seal had an irresistible force. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the two dragon mountains of Yaotai Mountain was far inferior to that of the mountain and river seal. Under the suppression of the mountain and river seal, the dragon pearls and dragon heads had been submerged. His Z also collapsed along with the dragon pearls and was about to be pulled into the mountain and river seal. Jingmu Bao suddenly felt that he was at his wit's end. He did not know how to get out of this predicament safely. Go all out. Jingmu Bao patted his head, and the tricolored genuine qi gushed out again. The genuine qi madly rushed into his Z, trying to stabilize his Z. Roar! Another clear dragon roar came from the mountain and river seal. At first glance, it sounded like two dragon figures struggling, but Jingmu Bao knew that this was not the qi of the mountain range that he had previously controlled, because along with this dragon roar, the suction of the mountain and river seal suddenly increased several times. His Z collapsed with a loud bang, and the spirit punishment vital light took advantage of the situation to fall. Jingmu Bao only had time to swing his weapon, and the spirit punishment vital light had already broken through his defense and swept past his huge neck. Puff! Blood soared into the sky, and the whole golden body fell down with a loud bang. Good. Xiaohua's heart relaxed. He urged the spirit punishment vital light to fall again, preparing to kill Jingmu Bao's spirit that had already been refined back to the void. However, before the spirit punishment vital light fell, a terrifying fluctuation came out from Jingmu Bao's prostrated golden body. At the same time, the Z, under the suppression of the mountain and river seal, also sent out the same fluctuation. Not good. Xiaohua was both regretful and frightened. He knew that he had not been able to completely kill Jingmu Bao according to his previous plan. Jingmu Bao knew that he could not escape death at the last moment, and did not hesitate to self-detonate his spirit to perish together with Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua's cultivation was on par with Jing Mubao's and he had many means, it was impossible for him to stop Jing Mubao's self-detonation at the same level.
Chapter 36:14. Xiao Hua hastily put away the sword gourd. Ignoring the soaring dragon shears, he had dragon vein Xiao Hua use the mountain and river seal to block the two dragon-shaped tails in front of him. That 5th grade Star Monarch self-detonation had already arrived. Rumble! The entire defensive formation shook once again, and all the mountains and rivers within a dozen li turned into nothingness. Wave after wave of qi rushed into the sky, spreading in all directions. Xiao Hua, who was at the center of the qi waves, could no longer resist. His dragon-shaped qi was smashed into fragments, his defensive earth shields were torn apart, and clusters of protective golden light were instantly extinguished. In the end, his golden body was torn into pieces, and the brilliance of Xiao Hua's physical body was extinguished. It was like a fallen leaf drifting in the air with the waves. After the time it took to eat a meal, the entire defensive formation slowly calmed down. Originally, the defensive formation controlled by Jing Mushuan was one of the 28 star formations. It covered an area of several dozen li. As a 5th grade Star Monarch, Jing Mushuan's self-detonation was equivalent to a Taoist spirit-severing cultivator. His self-detonation could cover 100 li or even several hundred li. However, in order to kill Xiao Hua, Jing Mushuan specially controlled the range of his self-detonation. Of the entire defensive formation, only the area where Xiao Hua and Jing Mushuan fought turned into nothingness. After a long while, suddenly, an arrogant and shrill laugh came from the ground. "Damn it, I'm actually still alive. This rare treasure is mine. Ha ha ha." Immediately, a black and rough nascent soul cultivator flew up from the ground. His divine sense swept through the entire mountain peak, as if he was looking for the jade box that Jing Mushuan and the other nascent soul cultivators failed to snatch before his death. Just as this cultivator released his divine sense, 5 different divine senses appeared in the mountain range. These 6 divine senses suddenly collided in the air. Then, 5 nascent soul cultivators with tattered Taoist robes rushed into the air from different hiding places. The 6 of them stood still in midair like trapped beasts, their faces still in shock. More than a dozen nascent soul cultivators had fallen into the defensive formation, and only a few of them had been killed in the fierce battle. The others were only injured, but Jing Mu's self-detonation had almost killed all of the nascent soul cultivators who were seriously injured. Although the remaining 6 nascent soul cultivators had managed to escape, it appeared that they had also suffered significant losses. Reverend Yuanqing and Reverend Xianxia each stood at a corner. Their faces also carried the same expression of luck. They had already realized that everything was part of Xiao Hua's plan when Xiao Hua suddenly attacked and killed Jing Mubai. Especially Taoist Yuanqing, who had some understanding of Xiao Hua, immediately understood that the fight between the two would not end well. He made a decision almost instantaneously, giving up on snatching the rare treasure in the jade box and fleeing into the distance as soon as possible, away from the place where the two were fighting. Although Reverend Xianxia was arrogant, he was also alert. He had been paying attention to Reverend Yuanqing, who was hostile to him. When he saw Reverend Yuanqing give up the rare treasure, although he was extremely unwilling, he also fled, as far as possible from Xiao Hua and the others. Even though the two of them had reacted early, they were still injured by Jing Mubai's dying strike. After escaping the calamity and coming out again, each of them had different feelings. Taoist Xianxia felt both lucky and ecstatic. It could be said that he had survived a double calamity. He had formed a personal grudge with Xiao Hua. He even considered killing Xiao Hua with the power of wind and thunder after leaving the Imperial Formation or the Jade Pavilion gathering. Now, seeing that Xiao Hua's means were even more powerful than the Star Monarch guarding the formation, Taoist Xianxia shuddered. He really didn't dare to imagine the result if he dealt with Xiao Hua. Who would live and who would die? Fortunately, this guy perished together with the Guardian Star, so I didn't have to worry about it. This is Xiao Hua's remains? Just as Reverend Xianxia was rejoicing, his divine sense swept over and suddenly found an abnormally damaged body. This body was covered in a blood-stained Taoist robe, and there was not a single piece of undamaged flesh on the body. Those tightly closed slender eyes, and that deathly pale face without any color of blood. Wasn't this Xiao Hua,
who had shocked Reverend Xianxia greatly. Not good. This guy is still breathing. As soon as Reverend Xianxia discovered Xiaohua's corpse, he immediately became frightened and couldn't help but steal glances at the other cultivators. Fortunately, Reverend Yuanqing and the other cultivators were taking pills, and the places where the jade box could be located were all swept by their spiritual sense. Therefore, no one discovered Xiaohua's corpse. If this guy is allowed to recover, wouldn't this old man's previous plan be for naught? If this guy is allowed to come back to life, how can this old man still have a share of the rare treasure in the jade box? Moreover, if Reverend Yuanqing knew that Xiaohua was not dead, wouldn't he immediately save him? The favor of saving a 5th grade essence chi cultivator, I'm afraid he won't be able to repay it in his lifetime. Reverend Xiangtian's heart could not help but violently beat. Moreover, Xiaohua just killed the star monarch guarding the formation. His magic treasure, and his nascent soul. He even took the star monarch guarding the formation. Damn, this is comparable to the rare treasure in the jade box. With this thought, Reverend Xiangtian's right hand trembled slightly, and the damaged flying sword in his hand could not help but let out a low sword hum. However, just as Xiangtian was tempted, he hesitated again. After all, before this, Xiaohua had already used a trick to deceive the heavens. As early as when he entered the formation, he pretended to be injured by Jing Muxiao's python spear, luring Jing Muxiao into a trap. Who knew if Xiaohua was using another trick at this time? However, Xiaohua's body fluttered down and crashed into a mountain peak. The collapsed mountain peak blocked Xiaohua's fall. Xiaohua's body rolled a few times on the mountain peak. His body was covered with a lot of dust. Even the rocks on the mountain peak gradually rolled down and slid off Xiaohua's body. There were also traces of blood on the rocks after they slid off Xiaohua's body. Seeing this, Taoist Xiangtian immediately understood that Xiaohua must have fainted. Even the nascent soul in Xiaohua's body must have been knocked out by Jing Mubai's self-detonation. If he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to kill Xiaohua, even if Xiaohua didn't wake up, as long as the nascent soul caught its breath, it would definitely attract Taoist Yuanqing's attention. However, Reverend Xiangtian still underestimated the vigilance of Reverend Yuanqing and the other nascent soul cultivators. Although the other 5 were taking pills, the sword hum in Reverend Xiangtian's hand caused them to raise their heads. Humph. Sage Xiangtian coldly snorted and swept his gaze across the crowd. The flying sword in his hand moved, and a not-so-brilliant sword light soared into the sky, fiercely stabbing towards the heart of Xiaohua, who had landed on the cliff in the distance. Everyone was stunned and hurriedly looked in that direction. 2 cultivators raised their hands and were about to release their magic treasures. Everyone thought that Reverend Xiangtian had discovered the Imperial Jade Seal and hurriedly attacked. However, when they saw that Reverend Xiangtian was attacking Xiaohua's body with their eyes and spiritual sense, they were stunned. After all, in their hearts, Xiaohua should have died a long time ago. Reverend Yuanqing was also stunned. The flying halberd was like the magic treasures of the other nascent soul cultivators and stopped in midair. Without the restriction of the defensive formation, a nascent soul cultivator was no different from a fierce tiger with wings. Taoist Xiangtian took the initiative to attack, and with Taoist Yuanqing's hesitation, the meteor-like lightning had already pierced Xiaohua's chest. An indescribable expression appeared on Reverend Yuanqing's face. He pointed his finger and was about to retrieve the halberd. He knew that even if he and Reverend Xiangtian attacked together, they wouldn't be able to snatch it away. Rather than offending Reverend Xiangtian for no reason, it would be better to wait for an opportunity to escape. Although Reverend Xiangtian's expression didn't change, his heart was still clenched. He was afraid that something would happen again. Seeing that Reverend Yuanqing no longer tried to stop him and that the flying sword was about to reach Xiaohua, Reverend Xiangtian's heart dropped. After all, they were so close that even if Xiaohua was in perfect condition, he would still be seriously injured. He already had the advantage against Xiaohua. People with ulterior motives will always encounter ghosts. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce Xiaohua's chest, an iron rod suddenly appeared in front of Xiaohua. Moreover, the iron rod suddenly expanded and blocked the flying sword with a flick of a finger. Clang! A loud noise rang out, and sparks flew everywhere. The flying sword pierced the iron staff and unexpectedly let out a mournful cry. A cluster of sword light scattered out like cold plum blossoms, falling in defeat in front of Xiaohua. Ah! Reverend Xianxia was stunned. He was familiar with this iron staff. Wasn't it the same staff that Xiao Hua was holding before? Moreover, at this moment, Xiangtian's heart turned to ashes.
Deceiving the heavens, 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 deceiving. Seeing that Xiao Hua's face was somewhat dirty and messy, like the eyes of a morning star, Reverend Xiangtian hurriedly circulated his magic power. At this moment, a strange golden light flew over from the side. The frightened Reverend Xiangtian didn't even have time to defend. The golden light cut through Reverend Xiangtian's waist in the blink of an eye, causing blood to spurt out. Reverend Xiangtian looked down in disbelief at the blood that was slowly flowing out of his body. Above his head, a bright light flashed and a 6-foot-tall Yuanying appeared. It was holding a small sword in its hand and wearing a small soft armor.
As soon as this Yuanying appeared, its body flashed with light. It simply didn't want to face anyone and hid itself in the void. It wanted to teleport away.
Xiao Hua's face was as calm as water as he stood up.
The sword gourd flew out of the space and covered Taoist Master Xiangtian's Yuanying. The green and red spirit-slaying Yuan light rushed out, preparing to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. However, before the spirit-slaying origin light could fly out, a white mist appeared in the sky. Within the mist, an aura that caused all the cultivators to suffocate came from the nascent soul. A majestic pillar of aura descended from the sky and covered the nascent soul. The majestic pillar of aura was so solid that the spirit-slaying origin light couldn't land on the nascent soul. Even the nascent soul, which was originally in a daze, woke up. However, after waking up, the nascent soul was even more afraid because the majestic pillar of aura had dragged it out of the sky. You're tuning into the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.